Never, never should she try to leave him. By breaking him from the inside, she thought she could escape peacefully. She said that it was not so. He asks to be called by name. Underneath the black strands of his hair, his red eyes shone so brightly that it seemed as if they would swallow him up. The sharp howl of the wind seemed to begin to move away, creating the feeling that in this place, no, in the whole world, there were only the two of them left. He, like a hungry beast, approached with his lips. At that moment, the girl holding the book raised her hand to her mouth. The author's writing skills are just incredible. His strong arm wrapped around her waist. Oh my God! How long had she waited for this moment? A maid entered the room. A guest from the imperial palace came to her. She closed the book with her hand and was upset that it was at such an important moment. This beautiful girl's name was Emily Meggerino. This is the quiet and peaceful estate of Shumarin, where Isaac Measurin's only daughter lives, founder of the Northern Duchy Research Center at Shumarin Academy. In other words, she is a fan of novels with the participation of the Duke of the North. As everyone has already guessed, her main hobby is reading novels. Especially specializing in studying the profile of the Duke, her dream is to marry the Duke of the North. Thus, each of her birthdays passes very peacefully and eventfully. The maid was surprised why Emily suddenly came from the imperial palace. She hoped nothing serious happened. Although she had never been to the capital, let alone the palace, there was a look of obvious surprise on her face. Opposite, a man sat and said that she was exactly as she had been described. His Majesty the Emperor demanded a divorce from her. She choked. This news shocked her. She had never even met His Majesty. She leaned forward a little and covered her face with her hands. The temple registered the marriage by mistake. Strictly on paper, Emily is now married to His Majesty. The situation was tense. However, according to the divorce procedure provided by imperial law, after the divorce, the former empress must go into seclusion for 10 years to completely lose political power. Therefore, the current name was ordered to move to Likai Island, meaning that she will not be able to return to the mainland for 10 years. In return, His Majesty offered worthy compensation, promising vast lands, wealth, and an estate. The screams from the estate were so loud that the gardener was shocked. It was too much of a reaction, because they made a mistake. Before they could finish speaking, Isaac grabbed her and covered her mouth with his hand. As Isaac held Emily, the man leaned away. The assistant asked Sir Ryan if this was really enough, to which he replied that they had done everything they had to. The estate glowed with sunlight. Emily was very upset. No matter how much she thought about it, this was complete absurdity. Even for the imperial family, this was too much. The father tried to calm his daughter down. She turned to her father. Isn't he angry with this attitude? After all, it was they who made the mistake. Why should she clean it up? But they cannot disobey the imperial order. Looking into her eyes, Emily looked at her father. Her father was a commoner knight. 10 years ago, he took part in the war and became a hero. For this, he received the title of Viscount and the estate of Shumarin with its lands. He is not interested in noble strife. He is a truly loyal subject of his people, ready to give his life for the empire. But what is the point in obeying such an absurd order? Because the fate of a traitor who agrees to 10 years is not much different. By the way, she also has her own plans for life. She must marry the Duke of the North. Being bound by human rules is just awful. A huge phoenix appeared before her. Kukas tried to console her, since she belonged to the great bonds that controlled the flow of the world. She covered her ears with her hands because he had been talking this nonsense for several years. She won't sacrifice herself like her father. Emily opened her closet. One wish, to create a commotion in the temple and force them to correct the situation, and if nothing comes of it, then the imperial palace will look in. She must see in person the face of the man called her husband. Phoenix just watched. Finally, these have already started to act. Dressed as a boy, Emily thinks about how to get into the stable. When she saw her father, she said that she couldn't just accept it. Father just stood there in armor. He asked what was going to the capital. The emperor's order, the duty of a nobleman, and the honor of a knight. If she really wanted to go, she must first defeat him, the Red Lion Shumarin. The father in armor fell. His daughter, who had already mastered the fire rune to an advanced level enough to stand up to her old father, was raised by the butler and maid. Emily crossed the main gate, so they decided to check if they needed to send someone for her, to which the father said no. They did everything possible to prevent the escape. The time has come when she herself must make decisions. With her blood, she shouldn't live under the eternal guardianship and decrees of her elders. She should test herself in real trials. The maid felt sorry for Isaac. A paradise for travelers and the largest trading city of the empire. Since this is the only route from the south to the capital, not only all the merchants of the mainland, but also countless travelers, mercenaries, messengers, common workers, and bandits come here, so the place is always overflowing with people and money. People went about their business. Emily finally arrived. Despite her appearance, she is still the main character. She seemed to have overdone it when she decided to cover a 2-week distance in 3 days, galloping at full speed without any rest. The horse sniffed the hanging meat. She tried to bite off a piece. Then Emily stopped her and said no. Emily asked the horse to get it together because no one should know that she was a hybrid horse. She should be taken for an ordinary traveler. But the horse turned to the owner and said that she had no conscience because she planned to feed him miserable pieces of dried beef. But he had to endure for a week. Emily pushed the horse into the stable and said that once they got to the capital, there she would eat whatever she wanted. The horse tried to call her back, but she ran away tipsily, saying, "My poor horse. She always has a hard time with separation." Emily went to the hotel and asked for a room for one with food. She parodies a guy. She put her hand on the table, exhaled, and said it in such a way that the men at the next table turned to look at her. He almost died of hunger. They brought her food, and these same 2 guys doubted that it was a man because he was kind of puny. But seeing how she was flying away from the food, doubts faded into the background. She was very hungry. At first she thought of leaving some for Shukrim, but then she realized that it was too risky and they could get caught. Shukrim, a hybrid horse? Its kind is one of the most ancient creatures, obtained from the mixture of dragon and horse. In other words, it can be attributed to the sacred beasts. It is an incredibly intelligent carnivore, so hardy that it can cross the entire continent in a week. Of course, their value is indescribable. Such beasts are difficult to find outside the imperial family, and she was lucky to pick it up on the road. Yes, that's right, she just bumped into him on the street, right in the middle of the battlefield. She offered him a piece of dried meat, but then he refused. Even if she was from those bloodlines, he would not fall for some peace. The war with the Servan Empire lasted 10 years. She grew as she progressed. Her father often took her with him to recent battlefields, and when she turned 10, she finally finished. Now that Emily has decided to enjoy her youth, she is told to spend another 10 years in exile. She really hopes that the emperor will be an accommodating person. Muta, the largest trading city of the Furza Empire, is the one who rules Muta. In some ways, they are even more powerful than the imperial family and more influential than the temple itself. The joint stock company is the Tom Holdings Corporation. There is no place in Muta that Tom's hands cannot reach, from children's candy to black market money. This huge company dominates the Furz Empire. Surprisingly, it is in the hands of one young guy, the founder of Tom Holdings, Tom Rukin. This time the price of imported hay had increased, and he asked to know why. Tom was approached by his ward. He wanted to know where this horse came from. The groom ran up and said that a guest had left her, Tom's hotel, and also let's check if everything was okay. Tom decided to clarify whether the man whose horse it was from a noble family, to which he received the answer that he was only a groom and apologized, since he did not know the details, but assumed that since he was staying at this inn, most likely he was a commoner. He looked at him carefully. And then he gave the order to find out about this man. One of his subordinates asked him why he suddenly became interested in the owner of this horse, to which he received the answer that if he wanted to conduct business competently, he needed to be more perceptive. He also added that this was not an ordinary horse, but a hybrid. The guy was surprised and asked where some commoner got it from. Tom assumed that their guest most likely had a reason for hiding his identity. But if this is an attempt by the emperor to send his man to them, the situation will change dramatically. The magical light of the moon fell on the hotel. Emily was drooling into her pillow. Unknown people got through the window and were surprised that it was a girl. She looks more like a runaway noblewoman. The duo known as the Knight Brothers, one of the legendary brothers, nothing can be hidden from them that can be stolen. In fact, they are petty thieves. They really hope she doesn't wake up. He asked his brother. He remembered how much wild mushroom powder was in her dish, enough to knock out a herd of elephants. So they can easily take all her things. One of the brothers was afraid that they would run into a beggar again, but this was actually a noblewoman. Suddenly his gaze fell on the sword and he asked what it was. The brother didn't know. He only said that it looked like some kind of antique, although she couldn't have been wearing a real sword. They assumed that the sword was expensive, but then Amelia kicked one of the guys. The guy hits the wall. His brother turns around, not understanding what is happening, and then she adds, "What a scoundrel. When did you manage to wake up?" Before he could finish speaking properly, in a matter of seconds, he found himself pressed against the wall. Her eyes lit up yellow and she asked how they dared to disturb the Crete, the hired killers. 2 guys were sitting with bumps on their heads. She ordered them to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Emily asked if they were trying to steal my precious Krita, to which they said no. They didn't even know what this thing was, just thieves who wanted to get some coins. A couple of thieves were wandering around and completely by chance chose her room. It's hard to believe, but they swore that they were telling the truth. They only hoped to make a little money from young and inexperienced travelers. They usually slip sleeping pills to the visitors beforehand, and by the way, they are quite famous in these parts. Legends of the Muta, brothers of the night, capable of stealing anything and anywhere. This is their working motto. Emily asked, "Say whatever you want," and the guys looked at her questioningly. Sleeping pills are very expensive, but few people know this. But the powder of wild mushrooms perfectly fulfills the function of a sleeping pill, but they are perplexed why it did not work on her. Forest mushrooms. They have no effect on her. Schumarin's Red Lion, Knight Isaac Mejerino, was part of the knightly troop along with Emily's named uncles and aunts. They included a young warrior who had earned a reputation as a master of medicine. Emily called her Aunt Greta. She made an invaluable contribution during the fighting when there were problems with the supply of medicines, while she managed to bravely take part in all the battles. The problem was that she became overly attached to little Emily and fed her these mushrooms, to which the father asked not to feed the child any poison. Thanks to the most subtle approach to dosing dangerous substances, Greta was able to develop a strong immunity to poisons in Emily. Practically no poisons affect her. The boys looked at her with their mouths open, and they asked how this was possible. Not only did she beat up 2 grown men like they were children, but poisons didn't work on her either. Emily said she thought she should turn them into the city guard. They started begging her not to do it. They promised that they would no longer steal. Hunger and despair drove them to this dirty deed. Their mother was seriously ill, and they could hardly find money for medicine. From the other side of the door, they asked if everything was okay, because a strange noise was coming from the room. The boys hugged each other and looked at each other in fear they had been heard. She turned to the guys. Pointing the ball at the window, she told them to take the money and get out. They had 10 seconds to do everything. They asked in surprise if they were letting us go. They may be thieves, but it doesn't look like they managed to hurt or kill anyone, so consider this your chance to get off the slippery slope. They must definitely spend this money on their mother's medicine. They continued to look as if they didn't understand whether it was a joke or not. They collected the coins from the floor and thanked her for her kindness. They left with a bag in their hands. One of the brothers turned around, laughed, and said, "What a fool! She just believed this nonsense." Although they had never seen their parents in their lives, the second asked, maybe it would be better for them to deceive people rather than rob them. As they ran, for a second it seemed that they met the Red Witch again. The manager came into her room with a frying pan, afraid that there were burglars, but Emily reassured him and said that she was just trying to swat a bug. She sat down on the bed and exhaled. She doesn't remember her mother at all. Maybe that's why she gave in to her emotions. Her gaze fell on the window, and she asked if he was in cahoots with them. The guy didn't understand and hid. It turned out that he was not alone. As soon as Emily approached the window, they ran away. Apparently there is lawlessness in this area. How can you travel here when there are lies and murderers all around? His name is Max Lin, and he looks to be about 18 years old. He used central bank gold coins to pay, and they say that upon arrival he was covered in dust and dirt, like a homeless person. However, the guest boldly approached the worker as if nothing had happened. He quoted, "The room with food, please." He ate as if he had been starving for a long time, and at the same time he observed basic etiquette. Tom thought about it. Looks like a young scion of southern nobility. The hybrid horse in the stable looked emaciated. It would take at least 3 days of non-stop riding to get it to that state. It is logical to assume that her master has come all the way from the depths of the southern lands of the empire, since the young nobleman uses a hybrid for transportation and rushes to the capital in a hurry. While hiding his identity, most likely, he has an extremely urgent matter. Here an observer appeared on the horizon and managed to conduct surveillance as he had ordered. Besides him, in the indicated place there were the so-called Brothers of the Night, small mittens who had been operating in their city for several years. He approached to help the young man in case of danger, but he easily overpowered the brothers. Moreover, if the observer understood correctly, he has immunity to any poisons. As soon as the guest suspected his presence, he immediately retreated. It's impossible to say exactly what rune he's using, but it seems they're dealing with a rune wielder. Tom asked Luke what was going on with the imperial family. Nothing had been heard from the Xena elders. He replied that there was no news yet. Xena only sent some financial reports. Nothing unusual. Tom increasingly suspects that this man is a spy for His Majesty, and he asked to arrange a meeting for them. Everything should go as naturally as possible. 20 years ago, the continent of Ashi was consumed by the flames of imperial ambitions. The imperial family, wielding the power to destroy human consciousness, swept through many countries, leaving behind devastation and mountains of dead people. And when the entire continent was on the verge of collapse, the Fyrds Empire, led by the knight Isaac Measurin, successfully recaptured the vast southern lands. It was this event that earned him the title of Red Lion. It was the beginning of an even more brutal war between the two empires, and after 9 painful years of war in the Battle of the Carrion Fields, the situation was turned upside down in an instant, thanks to just one man. He beheaded with his own hands all the members of the imperial family of Servan. The military and strategic genius of this young man united 70% of the entire continent under his banner and ended the bloody war. He was the 16-year-old crown prince of the Fyrza Empire. From now on, the sole ruler of the 5 great dynasties of the entire continent, Charles Fyrza. Thus, the youngest emperor in history managed to stabilize the entire foreign policy situation during his 10 years of rule. He asked to repeat it. The 4th emperor of Fyrza, Charles Felician Fyrza, he asked, "Am I married?" To which the subjects responded that it looked like yes. The temple had made a mistake. The registration had been completed 3 years ago. So, according to official documents, he currently has a wife. Charles was amused by the fact that his subjects only reported this to him after 3 years. Charlie was unhappy. His subjects apologized. He just asked to quietly fix everything so that no traces of this ridiculous mistake would remain. But it was impossible to fix it. The marriage process is under the jurisdiction of the temple. The imperial palace has no right to interfere in their affairs. Such a situation arose for the first time. His subjects stood nearby, worried about his reaction. He smiled. His hand reached out to some papers. He handed them to the woman. The great emperor Charles Fyrza, war hero, savior of an entire continent. In the absence of a wide audience, he reveals his true nature as a ruthless psychopath, and the papers fly straight to his subject. A mad dog, a scoundrel, a sadist. While he was shaking the poor guy, he turned to Lucas. He needs a meeting with the high priest. He asked her to arrange it now. His Majesty of Rage. The advisor, Lucas, said that everything would be done. He walked along saying, "O merciful Lord, I pray you, let the temple set things right immediately." But alas, this is impossible. Charles was displeased, and the advisor stood with bulging eyes. They tried to find out the reason, but he said that's what the rules say. The birth documents of a member of the imperial family, his education, and everything else are always regulated by the temple. This unbreakable rule was introduced to prevent any possible shenanigans within the imperial palace. For this reason, even the emperor is not able to change their contents. This is not a simple document editing issue. This is a temple error that should be corrected immediately. But he said that this is only his assertion, and according to temple records, the marriage registration was filed and signed 3 years ago. The period during which this document can be corrected is 1 year. After this time, all records are blessed and sealed, no matter what your reason is. From now on, you have no right to change them. And since the event was very important, the document was blessed 3 times. The advisor saw the expression on Charles's face and asked him to remain calm. Charles decided to clarify that if they invited all the people involved to testify, it could affect the legitimacy of the document. I wonder how they will prove it. How can the temple know that the legal wife is not under pressure from the emperor who has changed his tastes? He asked if he realized what he was being accused of. But the man continues to drink his tea as before. The advisor asked to recall the rune, since it is a sacred temple. The emperor is the most influential and powerful man in the entire empire, and therefore the laws must be applied most strictly when it comes to him directly. As the high priest of this temple, he declares that His Majesty's marriage will not be annulled. Charles punched the wall with all his might. He had wild eyes and very bad thoughts. He thought about maybe just burning everything to hell, because his people would get used to the new religion. He was outraged for a long time about how they dared to seal the records of the emperor's marriage without even warning him. Charlie was called and turned to ask a question. Advisor Lucas wanted to say something. A few years ago, a lot of paperwork accumulated in the classroom. But he ordered him to figure it out himself. After all, it was not for nothing that he took the brightest mind of the academy as an assistant, but the guy did not have the right to sign them himself. Papers such as budget allocations require his attention, some documents need to be looked at in person, but for Charles this was some kind of hassle. The rebels have staged another assassination attempt. These idiots think they can finish him off. Charles asked again about the documents. The guy answered that he had papers from the temple that he had to look at personally, that it was enshrined in law. Then he asked to simply put them aside and not send them. It could be very important. In the worst case, he should still, before he could finish speaking, Charles looked at him with such an angry and frightening face and once again told him not to send the documents. Most of them, financial donations, the subject was interested in how much he could let through, but in response he received, "Decide for yourself, all this could lead to problems." But Charles was not interested. The advisor remembered this situation. His face turned sad for a moment. Grabbing Lucas, he pinned him against the wall and said that he should have prevented all potential problems, but he was already trying his best to get his attention on those documents. He continued to hold it. There is no way they could not find a way out of this situation. After all, they are not actually a married couple. Charles folded his hands in front of him and asked, "Divorce?" Now, this is the only solution. All the records will remain in the documents, but practically no one has the right to view them. So for the palace, this is a good option. He thought about it, and then he asked who this woman was, to which he received the answer: a noble woman from the provincial lands. The eldest daughter of Viscount Isaac Majorino, Lady Emily. Putting his hand on his chin, he said, "Sir Isaac, then. Could it really be that same daughter?" As far as he knows, Sir Isaac, she is a commoner knight who received the title for his military services. She is now 21 years old and has no known problems. He waved his hand and said to forget about the divorce. A very young lady will be branded as a divorced woman. Is that a thing? Besides, a divorce from the emperor means life, in fact, in exile for 10 whole years. Lucas was surprised that His Majesty the Emperor was worried about someone other than himself. He also added that this divorce would only bring benefits to Lady Emily. She would receive all the benefits of the former empress, and in addition a huge payment with new possessions. For the Viscount's daughter, this is a real gift of fate. But the fact remains that they risk ruining the young lady's future. He wonders if there are other options. Charles's brother Ryan suggested a national day of mourning. Everyone looked at him in surprise. These jokes were inappropriate. Then if none of the options were suitable, why not just marry her? Ryan said, "Come on, both of you. You don't like this or that? Like little children? You're not 7 years old." Lucas asked him to stop. Charles slammed his hand down on the table. He invited him to go out with him for a while. There are 2 main types of magic in the Furza Empire. The first is the invocation of magic using minerals, the so-called mana stones. They work on the basis of complex rituals and calculations. The second, runic magic, relies on natural forces by accumulating them in the body of the magician. In these parts, magic is widespread and used for routine purposes. It is quite accessible thanks to the presence of mana in me. However, ore magic requires physiological characteristics and is not within everyone's power. In other words, a person must have a natural gift. In the Furza Empire, there are people with outstanding combat and magical skills. They are called rune knights. The advisor watched the fight between the 2 brothers. And also the thought flashed through his head that they would destroy everything around them again. The wind rune, also known as the force of the flow, is most effective for combat, which is why most rune knights, including Sir Ryan, chose the wind rune. In contrast, the ice rune, also known as frost power, is considered much less effective for battle. But there is one thing. A huge flash hit near Ryan so strong that he barely managed to get back. He said, "Brother, if you overdo the rune wind." The fight continued. Ryan defended himself. Such powerful streams of energy from an ordinary training sword. "We need to break the distance." He kicked the ground, where an icy surface immediately formed. The brother decided to surrender. The advisor covered his face with a folder to avoid going blind. The emperor has control over all 5 elemental runes, which is one of the reasons why he is the sole ruler of the 5 great dynasties of the continent. It seems he didn't give his only younger brother enough discipline lessons. He should have spent more time, especially on education. Charlie asks to say thank you for being so gentle with him. He pointed the sword at his face and said, "Sir Ryan Bardier de Furza." Charles asked to go to Majorino and inform them of the divorce in person. The brothers said that it was a 2-week journey on horseback to Shumarin. He was the captain of the palace guard. Did he really want to send him there? Charles quickly tries to get away so as not to listen to his brother's whining. Thus, 2 weeks later, at the Majorino estate, Ryan adjusted his suit, and his subordinate decided to ask if everything would be okay, to which he replied that they had not done their job. He is very soft when it comes to Majorino. When this former commoner brazenly refused the emperor's offer to accept a position as commander of the troops, instead of punishing him, Charles granted Isaac a noble title and personal estates. He thought he would have to put pressure on them using this fact, but it didn't seem necessary. Ryan mounted his horse and thought it was just an ordinary backwater estate with an old retired knight and his ill-bred daughter. They think there is no need to worry. Sir Ryan, the only brother of the current ruler, he renounced the life of a nobleman to become the emperor's swordsman and, through his own efforts, achieved the rank of captain of the elite Imperial Palace Guard. But he did not yet know that a poorly educated girl from a backwater estate was capable of creating such a stir in the empire. About a young man named Max Lin. They needed to resolve this issue urgently. Secretary Luke asked what he should do. The boss ordered to organize everything as naturally as possible. "What about that hybrid horse idea?" the secretary asked. The owner said that he was leaving tomorrow and asked only to give the horse some water. Since hybrids eat only meat, it would not be difficult for them to reveal this fact. This is what they will take advantage of. Emily stood there not understanding what was happening. Shukrim destroyed the entire store. He was enjoying some meat. Someone shouted that the horse had caused a riot in the butcher's shop and asked in surprise, why was he eating meat? The guy sitting next to him said that it was not a horse, but some kind of monster. The butcher stood with a knife and watched all this with his mouth open. Emily called her horse. The crowd of people were saying that it seemed to be true. Someone's mad horse had caused a disturbance. Horrified by what was happening, Emily asked Shukrim if he would please explain to her what was going on here. A terrible hunger seized him. Amelia began to take the meat from him, but the resistance was strong. He asked for the last piece. Because you can't snatch food from the mouth of someone eating, Emily told him to let go quickly before she chopped up the horse meat herself. A huge piece flew out of her hands and landed on some man's face. It turned out to be the owner of the butcher shop. His name was Hans. Seeing what was happening, he fell to his knees. A man approached them, raised his fist, and cleared his throat to attract attention. He apologized and asked Emily if she was the owner of this horse. She smiled with a very guilty look. Rubbing the back of her head, she said she was truly sorry. He usually doesn't cause any problems. It's not like him at all. For Luke, this came as a real shock. They had planned to leave Muda this morning, but who knew that everything would turn out like this? As the boss had expected, this was no ordinary traveler. Anyone else in his place would have begged for forgiveness in tears and on their knees. But he was suspiciously calm. The water, saturated with an appetite stimulant, was even more effective than he thought. This monster had broken through 3 buildings to get to the food. But if that hadn't happened, they wouldn't have been able to organize everything. Emily started asking about compensation, thinking that the counter belonged to him. But the counter was owned by their subordinate. They are now at the headquarters of Tom Holdings, and the meat counter that was trashed is run by their man. So they will take on the legal process themselves. Emily said enthusiastically that she had heard about their company. It looks like everything will go easier than she thought. Shukri made a mess in the big shot shop. The guy remains calm. Even after hearing Tom's name, he becomes more and more suspicious to them. Since the losses were quite significant, he was not entitled to deal with them personally, so he decided to deviate. The door opened. Emily sipped her tea silently and looked around. She raised her head and was greeted in a friendly manner. As he was informed, her horse had caused a bit of a disturbance. She looked at him in surprise, recognizing the young man. His dark hair, red eyes, charcoal black suit. She said, "Duke of the North." Tom was surprised. There was shock on his face. How does he know? A brilliant entrepreneur with a gilded hand, despite his lowly origins, he now has more capital than many high-ranking nobles. But this is not his real personality. Sebastian Weiner de Servan, the last scion of the imperial family, and also the leader of the rebel forces who want to revive their empire, he once held the title of Duke and owned vast northern territories. The true Duke of the North. He examined her carefully. This young man, no, looks more like a girl. He even hides his gender. How interesting. Judging by the way she holds the cup, she is clearly the daughter of a noble family. But what is much more important, she knows about his origin. He smiled, asked for forgiveness, and also asked for clarification. Pretending not to understand anything, he asked what he meant by Duke of the North. I wonder what she meant by that. Depending on her answer, he will decide whether to finish her off right here and now. For a second, she completely forgot herself. He is such a perfect embodiment of the Northern Duke that she blurted it out by accident. He asked, "You just called me Duke of the North," to which she replied, "No, forget it. It was a slip of the tongue. Let's not talk about it. So what about compensation?" She tried to change the subject so awkwardly that it seemed to him as if she wanted to fool him. She asked how much she would owe for the destruction of her horse. He turned slightly to the side. He took out a counting board and said, "Let's count here." She didn't understand where it came from. He began to calculate the cost of repairing the 3 buildings, compensation for future losses, compensation for the moral damages of the store owner, the cost of all the destroyed goods, waste disposal fees, tax payments, and compensation for a tree belonging to 2 street vendors. The final amount came to 50,000 rubles. However, part of the blame also lies with the carelessly equipped stable, so they are willing to cover 10% of all expenses, so 45,000 rubles from her. She didn't even hear the price. It seemed to her that he was simply glowing. It was quite a tidy sum, but what could you do? The thought flashed through her mind that for 50,000 she could buy a dozen houses. Well, Muda is a trade center located not far from the capital, so the prices are high, and business expenses also inflate the price tag quite a bit. It didn't matter, because there was a trust fund in her name that her father had set up. If she withdrew money from it, he would be informed. And since her father was most likely looking for her now, he would probably come to Mutu in person. Well, never mind. She thought that Daddy would somehow sort it out. To Tom, it all seemed somehow strange. She probably realizes that 50,000 rubles is a fabulous sum, and yet she so easily agreed to pay it off. It would be logical to finally stop pretending to be a commoner. Why is she wasting time on this, or is she just checking? He can't tell if she's pretending to be a fool, or if she really is. It's hard for him to read what's on her mind. She doesn't have that kind of money on her. She needs to withdraw money from the Imperial Bank. She won't find a suitable bank in Muta, so she'll have to go to the capital. With all due respect, it's very risky for them to give her a few days to travel. She'll have to leave a deposit, but she doesn't have anything with her. He asked about the horse. It's a hybrid. It'll do just fine. She was amazed at how he knew. Then it dawned on her that Shukram had broken through several buildings and eaten meat in front of the crowd. Now he will understand that she is not a commoner. Of course, she could leave the horse in Muda, but how would she get to another city? He has personal business in the capital, so he suggested going together. The secretary asked Tom if he was going to go to the capital with that young man, that is the girl, to which he received a positive answer. He asked if he was sure, since there had been no noise from the emperor lately, but it could very well be a trap. Tom asked if he knew the most effective way to look into a person's soul. All you have to do is keep talking to him. No matter how clever he is at negotiating and deceiving, over time even the most sophisticated tricksters can give away all their secrets, and their plans become obvious, no matter what they hide. The journey to the capital will take the whole day. He will slowly reveal all her secrets. They set off on their journey. As they drove, Emily looked out the window. The atmosphere was slightly tense. It's a very awkward situation. It would probably be strange to act friendly when the blame lies with her. She decided to start with a light compliment. Clearing her throat, she said that he really did look like a northern duke. He thought that she was testing him again. Alas, he was poorly informed about the northern lands. Just an ordinary businessman. There was only one thing in his head. He needed to behave naturally and watch her reaction. She asked you, and you really don't know about the great Duke of the North. He doesn't understand what's wrong with her. After apologizing, he asked if she meant the title that the ruler of the northern lands receives. He gets the impression that she wants to drag him into a tough psychological battle. She extended her hand and pointed her finger at him. Emily will tell him everything he needs to know. Later, Sebastian would bitterly regret this. The first question, his beloved slipped and fell in the hallway. What actions? First, kill the architect who designed the hallway. Second, kill the servant responsible for cleaning. Third, kill the shoe designer. He asked why they were killing innocent people, and what that had to do with the title of Duke. The second question is, his beloved has insomnia. What actions? First, kill the furniture maker who installed the bed. Second, kill the maid who did not keep an eye on his beloved's insomnia. Third, kill the tailor who sewed her pajamas. He asked again emotionally why someone had to be killed. Was this like a test for personality disorder? So far, he's doing a terrible job. The third question is, the emperor sends his beloved to war, where she will inevitably die. If this is the emperor's order, she must obey, and there can be no question of it. She pointed her finger and shouted that he didn't look like the Duke of the North at all. In fact, he is the real Duke of the North, he thought to himself. It has been known since ancient times that a duke must be strong and cold-blooded. She came closer and listed what he should be like. Beautiful, mysterious, and a bunch of other points. But what is more important, he must be wonderful in bed. He, as usual, wonders what is wrong with this woman and suggests changing the topic, for example, the purpose of her visit or a hybrid horse. To which he received a negative answer. He couldn't get out of it. Consider himself very lucky. After all, he won't be able to find a more knowledgeable expert in the field of studying northern novels. They spent a day on the road. Sebastian will remember this for the rest of his days. They arrived at the capital of the empire, Sigrid. There were a lot of tall buildings there. Emily looked around the city with admiration through the carriage window. She asked if she could get out here. He had a face as if he had gone through the war alone, and added that as she wished. Finally, he is saved. She decided to clarify that she just needed to withdraw money and buy her horse and muta with it, and also thanked him for giving her a ride. He put his foot on the footrest. He extended his hand and added, "Let me help you, my lady." She blushed. It was very unexpected for her. Emily looked at him again, and indeed, his image was too good. "Put your hand on his," she added. Even considering his appearance, she wouldn't be able to count him passing the exam. 60 points, that's the maximum. He didn't understand. She winked and said that he would only be able to be called the Northern Duke when he reached 90 points. And then she would happily allow herself to be kidnapped. But he asked why he would kidnap her. The time has come to say goodbye. She bowed and said, "See you soon, Grand Duke." He smiled, and the secretary was beyond perplexity. Luke was surprised by what she said, Duke. He felt like he had revealed his true identity to her, and was now letting her go so easily. He suggested sending a spy to follow her, but Tom said no. And he added that everything should be left as is. For now, there is nothing to worry about. Mr. Sebastian, after the destruction of his homeland, he was obsessed with only the idea of avenging the Furtz Empire. Sebastian, whom he knows, did not care about anything other than this goal, and now the last member of the imperial family has fallen in love. He decided to head straight to the office. Luke was very worried that they had let this girl go. He fell asleep on the way. All the way he was afraid that he was about to go crazy. It seemed that her knowledge about the Northern Duke was bottomless. She did not stop her story even at night. He wondered where such a fragile body could get so much energy from. She cares so much about the Duke's image. He hit himself in the face. It's time to stop thinking about nonsense. It feels like he's going to go crazy soon. As if this witch wanted to drug him. He was horrified. Emily didn't even notice the moment when he started addressing her as a lady. It seems she got too carried away in the conversation and accidentally revealed that she was a girl. She approached the temple. The messenger said that registering the marriage was a simple mistake. She just needed to calmly explain the situation to them and solve the problem. Emily Majorino of Shumarin demands an audience with the High Priestess. She didn't understand what was going on, because the church was supposed to receive parishioners around the clock. I had to knock on the door for a long time, but then someone called her and she turned around. It was a little boy. He said the free food distribution is taking place in the building in front of the square, not here. She was not a vagabond. Her name is Emily Majorino, daughter of the great Viscount Isaac Majorino, Lord of Shumarin, asking permission to meet with the High Priest. The boy pointed to the side, hinting that she needed to leave. She hung her head and left. Suddenly, the High Priest came out to the boy and watched her leave. And also, if she comes to them again, they need to try to send her away again, but the boy had a question about why he doesn't want to let her into the temple. She needs to meet someone else first. Emily walked down the street, her stomach growling with hunger. She had been chatting so much with the Northern Duke that she had completely forgotten to eat on the road, but first she needed to get money from the bank, and tomorrow she would again demand a meeting with the High Priest, and if they didn't let her in, she would simply break down the door. When she approached the bank, she saw that working hours were from 9 to 4, closed on weekends and holidays. Today was Friday, and it was just after 5 o'clock. She didn't expect such a surprise. How can a bank close at 4 o'clock? What do working people do? A moment of despair, but remembering the free food distribution in front of the square, she decided to go there. She was a little ashamed to take what was intended for the homeless, but right now, she looked like it. Approaching the square, another disappointment followed because the distribution was over for today. It was only 15 minutes late. She sat down next to the tramps. I started thinking that maybe I shouldn't have given all the money to those thieves. Now she is alone in the capital, without a single penny in her pocket, and even without shoe cream, she will have to survive here for 2 whole days. At least her dear Krita is with her. Emily jumped up in horror. She was gone. Tom saw the sword. He immediately realized that the sword belonged to that girl. She got angry and thought that the Duke of the North had stolen it. Emily ran as fast as she could, thinking that with his lovely face and physique, he had originally wanted to intoxicate her. Lucas said, "No way, Your Majesty." Charles, as an emperor, simply wants to look at his people. If he gets recognized on the street, it will cause a real stir, so he wants to dress in something inconspicuous. Because his appearance is too recognizable. No one in the entire empire had such bright hair. He has no idea how many problems the guards will have with such a walk. Therefore, Lucas strongly requests to refrain from his secret checks. He proposed to organize an official tour of the capital with all the appropriate measures. Charles doesn't want too much fuss. Lucas is almost crying. A member of the palace guard, Vivi, agreed with Lucas's concerns because they were well-founded. They handed him some pills. They are able to change the color of hair for about a day without any side effects. He extended the pill to his mouth. If he uses the rune, the effect will disappear immediately, so don't forget about it. He looked in the mirror, and it was quite convenient. With such an appearance, there shouldn't be any problems. He opened the window and said not to say a word to the guard. Charles jumped out of the window. A frightened maid ran up to check if he was alive. Everyone remaining in the hall was just discussing when His Majesty would start adhering to official procedures, but it was high time for everyone to get used to his character. Lucas had never heard of such drugs before, to which Vivi slightly boasted that she was, as the people call her, a genius of modern medicine. The original purpose of these pills was to prevent hair loss, but they ended up with a drug with an unusual side effect. 10 years have passed since the end of the war. Furza is blossoming and developing as if it had never existed, but now problems of a new nature have arisen. Charles approached the free food distribution center. Are there really so many hungry people in his city that they had to open such a place? A lot of time has passed since the decree on state aid was issued, and the question arises in his head, what are the officials doing? It's like he's too soft on them. Someone came up from behind and touched his shoulder. He turned around with frightened eyes. It was Emily. She was all disheveled, dirty, and tired. She just wanted to warn him that, unfortunately, the building was already closed for today. But they work even on weekends, so we'll have to wait until tomorrow. He watched with interest as she spoke. He looked at her, a woman in men's clothes, but more importantly, her energy. Without a doubt, she is an advanced fire rune owner. There are not even 10 strong fire rune owners in the entire empire, and one is standing in front of him in the form of a vagabond. He was glad to meet her. He just had to find out for himself. He offered her a job. She was surprised. She thought that he was also a tramp, although even if he was very attractive in appearance. For some reason, she has the feeling that she has seen this man before. Her type is a black-haired duke with red eyes, and bright hair and green eyes are the features of minor characters. He said he could get her food. She bowed and said that she would be happy to take on the job. Charles was surprised that she was so happy to hear about food. He introduced himself as Detective Martin, and she kept her cards close to her chest and gave her name, Max Lynn. She asked what she should do. Charles pointed at the man. He is suspected of cheating on his official wife. We need to follow him and find evidence. She rushed towards him. Hiding around the corner of the house, Emily began surveillance. With a gesture, she indicated that they should behave quietly. At that moment, she was irresistible. While Emilia was busy with her work, he looked at her and thought, the red-haired owner of the fire rune. The man continued to be watched as he walked calmly down the street. Feeling that he was being followed, he grabbed his bag. And then it sped up. Emily realized that he seemed to have noticed them. She shouted, "Stay where you are, you shameless bastard," and headed towards him. The target was at a dead end, and in Charles's head there was a question as to why he started running. The man was not so simple. He jumped over a high fence and disappeared. She realized that it was a wind rune. It was unfair to do so. She grabbed her new friend and told him to hold on tight, and he asked what she was doing. Emily passed all the obstacles with lightning speed, holding the detective in her hands. Smoothly and carefully, she placed him on the ground. There was a huge look of shock on his face. He stroked her head and praised her like a dog. Since a person owns a rune, it means that he is not a small fish. Now it has no right to miss him. The man ran into the building. It became obvious to her that this was the place where he met his mistress. But why choose such a place? 4 bronze 7s. For Charles, this is a lucky box. Underground auction house, lucky box. No matter how complex the client's order is, they are able to obtain almost anything. However, since absolutely all goods are put up for auction, clients are forced to wait until their desired item is auctioned off. And despite this, with a success rate of 99.96%, they have become the most successful underground guild in the entire empire. The man ran into the hall so quickly and loudly that many turned around. When he ran in, they asked him what happened. He had to shed his tail on the way here. He said not to worry because he had successfully gotten away from them, and more importantly, he put it in his bag on the table. He was able to get it. They hit the jackpot. This is what is capable of killing His Majesty the Emperor. Emily was asked not to interfere. She is an advanced owner of the fire rune and is also physically strong. Her help could be useful, but the best solution would be not to involve outsiders in these matters. It's dangerous. He asked her to come back and also asks her to forget what she saw today. She shouted after him that since it was dangerous there, he especially shouldn't go there alone. And anyway, she would like to go there herself. He, a sophisticated detective, should not be exposed to such danger. He put his hand on her head and said that the next time they met, he would definitely treat her, but asked her to leave today's business to him. She saw him off with a question. There were many people sitting in the huge hall, covering their faces with masks and waiting for the performance to begin. The show's host welcomed everyone to today's auction. Charles watched everything from above. He canceled the mask and the man's place and said that for such a famous gang, they have terrible security. It would be too easy. The host began to introduce the list of goods: a gust of wind, an incredibly rare creature straight from a noble family, an adult hybrid horse, a sand tear, a slave from a mystical desert land. And most importantly, the death of the empire. The very name of this swamp excites the mind. Is this really directly related to His Majesty? Looks like Charles is in for a lucky jackpot today. Emily walked and thought that she would be able to eat a hearty meal. She felt very sad and melancholy. She thought, that man was very easy. Although if you think about it, it was too much. Since the emperor was very good at hiding his energy, she didn't even realize he was using runes. She began to worry that he had fallen into the hands of villains and that they would want to harm him. She turned around and ran back. There is a winner in the auction, a gust of wind, which goes for 650,000 rubles. The prices were higher than he expected. It looked like the biggest fish in the criminal world were gathered here. He had only one thing on his mind. In this situation, it would be better to contact the palace guards rather than try to solve everything alone. A curious head appeared and asked about the auction. Charles didn't expect to see her here. He asked her what she was doing there, to which he replied that she was worried about him, so she decided to slip away. There was also a question about how she was let in looking so suspicious. Surprisingly, the guards here are useless, she replied. From the outside, the place looked like some kind of barn, but looking down, she didn't expect to see anything like that. The host moved on to the next lot and introduced a beautiful young man, a tear of sand, born in the harsh lands on the edge of their continent, with eyes more reminiscent of rubies, his skin smooth and dark, and hair the color of blue sky. He looked very upset. Emily watched this whole scene with sad eyes. Charlie tried to say something, but Emily just asked why. What have they been fighting for all these damn years? She jumped from the balcony, and she shouted to the detective, "I'm sorry, but right now there is more important business." Charles was stunned, as if he froze, landed right on the stage. The presenter did not expect such a turn of events. From the stage, she shouted that the slave trade was prohibited in their empire. The presenter began to offer his deepest apologies for this misunderstanding, while on one side, the guards were already running. She began to untie the boy, saying that she would save him. Just let him stay close to her. It seems that the boy was in on it. He asked her not to interfere. Then she hit him on the head, which he certainly didn't expect. So small, but already learned to be rude, she picked him up and headed for the exit. Charles, standing on the balcony, thought that perhaps he should have listened to him better, although it didn't matter at all. The scumbags have several rune owners and are very proud of it, but at the same time they forget that each mage also has his own limits. When it comes to the owner of the fire rune, it is difficult to imagine anything more destructive. A powerful fire engulfed the building. It looks like she overdid it. The lack of practice is clearly showing. The boy woke up and asked to let him go. He was indignant. How dare they interfere in his affairs? He will never forgive this, especially the red-haired one. Emily stroked his head. He didn't even thank her, and she also reprimanded him, saying that pointing your finger at people is very impolite. Charles spoke, and they both turned towards him, not understanding what he was talking about. Emily asked what it meant. The boy already understood the situation. They had been watching them for quite a long time, so they didn't have to hide. Some people appeared from behind. They were dressed in cloaks, and their faces were hidden. Charles gave them permission to leave. They quickly disappeared from sight. She became interested in what kind of people they were and who this little boy was. Myrrh, another type of magic. It is similar to runes, but slightly different. He advised her to lay low for a while because the auction house people would try to track her down, but Emily said there was nothing to worry about. In that same second, he seemed to evaporate. He left so quickly that he didn't even say goodbye. Apparently, he can take care of himself. She suddenly remembered that he had promised to treat her. The men sat on the floor and said it was very dangerous. Their operation was too risky. If the Sultan found out about it, he would be furious. If those two idiots hadn't shown up, everything would have gone according to plan. The easiest way to find his brother is to join a nobleman's family under the guise of a slave. The boy became curious if they found out who ruined their plan. The man with bright brown hair is the Emperor of the Furza Empire. The boy asked if he was sure, because he didn't look like him at all. They hadn't yet managed to figure out how and why the Emperor was hiding under someone else's appearance, but his energy gave him away. Therefore, the aura seemed familiar to him. Now that even the Emperor was aware of the events, they should return immediately. the pain that had previously bothered him. If you remember, he was distracted and didn't even notice. His pain suddenly subsided. They were unable to establish the identity of the second person. They only found out that it was a woman. Right now, the measure seems to have stabilized. His servants said that they had to hurry. Adam looked at his talisman. Memories started to surface. I think she said her name, Max. He wondered how soon they would meet again. Charles stood with wild, angry eyes and watched. He lectured his officials on how they could organize a slave auction right in his capital, something that this bunch of idiots do around the clock. The emperor called everyone together in the middle of the night, without waiting for dawn. He doesn't need any excuses. He ordered them to take care of the well-being of his city, and they decided to ruin it. One of the officials was so scared that he even shed a tear. As it turned out, his brother Sir Ryan was involved. He told them that fish would not swim in excessively clean water. Charles's face showed great surprise. This news shocked him. He stated that as long as they could not monitor the criminal world, no problems would arise, so it was decided not to touch them. He asked again if they had indeed followed the district order, and also asked where he was now. As the captain of the guard, he is most likely at the scene now. What a mess they've made here. The subordinate turned to Ryan. They had almost cleared away all the rubble. Fortunately, not a single civilian was hurt. It looks like they were very lucky. He stepped on the envelope and picked it up. And it looks like he found a weapon against his own brother. The guards have already arrested all the suspects regarding the item. The death of the Empire, those interrogated say that it was not sold. He began to pull the contents out of the envelope. Having said that everything was fine, he began to study it carefully. Tom sat at the table and looked at the sword. He spread rumors in various places. Anyone with a nose for money probably heard them. The Servan Empire was destroyed long ago, but their descendants were not completely exterminated and now roam the lands of Furza. After 10 long years, they are ready to carry out their plan for revenge. Ryan set fire to the contents of the envelope and threw it on the ground. He wonders what expression his brother Charles will have on his face. Tom's secret office in the capital of the Empire, Xena's people began to act decisively. They intend to strike at the Emperor himself. Tom did not expect to hear such words from his secretary. What angered him most was that they did not first consult with him, their leader. Luke said that they were not satisfied with his plan because the preparations were taking too long. It seemed that they had some kind of trump card, and now they can't wait to use it to kill the Emperor. The elder said that tomorrow night, and he would be pleasantly surprised. A bunch of impatient old men, he has no intention of keeping cretins as assistants who only get in the way. After all, his plan is flawless. The nobles and subjects of the Servan Empire who survived the war with Furza formed a secret organization called Xena and spread its roots across the continent, sinking their fangs and claws into everything in order to one day restore the former glory of their empire. He can understand their lack of restraint, because many years have passed since the war. But these people don't realize that they survived it only because they never met Charles Furs in person. They can't even imagine what this man is capable of. Luke said, okay, he'd take a look at their so-called trump card. Tom said it was too dangerous and it would be better to send them there in a group. He has no intention of helping them, even if they are idiots. But they will surely carefully prepare the scene since they are in the capital. Why not watch everything from the front row? They start tomorrow night. Emily slept on the street. She had absolutely no strength. She was very hungry. These days had exhausted her and wrung her out like a sponge. The supplies she had managed to get hold of disappeared in a second as soon as she turned away. And as she had been told, even the homeless had their places assigned, she could not sleep wherever she wanted. And it was unexpected for her that the capital would be such a cruel city. Emily blamed two people for everything. The first was the damn emperor with his marriage, and the second was the vile detective. She would never forgive them. A boy came up to her and pointed his finger at her hand. He wondered if he was new here, to which Emily responded something like that and asked if she had taken his place. He held out his hands, in which was freshly baked, deliciously smelling, warm bread. With a smile on his face, he said it was for her. She asked what about him, to which he replied that he was given food in the canteen and that he would be able to get more later. It was free bread meant for the starving, he said. She looked very exhausted, so he decided she needed it more. Tears formed in her eyes. This capital is beautiful. It ate and cried at the same time. There was a large gathering of homeless people in this place, all going about their business. Emily thought it was a rich city and didn't expect to see so many homeless people here, but she just didn't know. The homeless and poor deliberately flock here from different regions. Since the emperor is personally responsible for the well-being of the capital, it is much easier to get help and support here, and some vagabonds are even hired. The boy was from Shumarin and lived in a small nearby village, but his parents abandoned him and he miraculously managed to reach this city. No one cares about the people as much as His Majesty the Emperor. Emily froze in one position. She immediately remembered the house and how she walked. There are also many poor people in Shumarin. There is not a single place without them. She spoke like a noblewoman, and the boy hopes that soon His Majesty will put an end to poverty in the empire. Before he could finish speaking, the sandwich flew straight into his face. It was unexpected, even for Emily. She asked why they were throwing food around, and was immediately told that they were feeding a homeless person. He laughed and said that his appetite had disappeared from the nauseating stench and where all those rats were coming from. What is the emperor even thinking about? He could have cleared the city long ago. The boy sat so confused, and his face showed strong disappointment. Emily's facial expression changed in a second. The guy who threw a sandwich at the boy asked if he knew who he was baring his teeth at. Not much time passed, he was already standing with knocked-out teeth and a broken arm. While the guard was taking him away, he was shouting something threatening, and Emily stood there with her hands tied. The rules in the capital are strict. The guards came running very quickly, but at her home everything could be resolved with a simple handshake. In general, it would not have been difficult for her to get out of that situation by using the rune. Emily lost consciousness and fell face down on the ground. Due to malnutrition, she became very weak. It seemed to her that she could not stand it any longer. She needed normal food. The guard officer tried to tell her something. The man she beat up turned out to be the son of a high-ranking official, not to mention that street fights are strictly prohibited. The officer didn't like being ignored. He asked her to state her name, age, where she was from, and the purpose of her arrival in the capital. She decided that she needed to calm down and tell him the truth. Her name is Emily Meggerino. She is the daughter of the Viscount of Shumarin, and she has come to the capital to meet with the High Priest and His Majesty. He asked about her ID, but she said she lost it. Name, age, and occupation unknown, probably entered the capital illegally. Shows signs of psychological deviations and delusions, may be dangerous to society, no need for further investigation, verdict, 3 months imprisonment. Emily thought it was unfair. The man sitting next to her in the cell asked her if it was her first time in prison. She was imprisoned unfairly. Or rather, she is partly to blame, but the blame does not lie solely on her, even though she hit one idiot once, but he got into trouble himself. To a large extent, it was self-defense, a real outrage. Her cellmate listened to her attentively. He put his hand on her shoulder and said that everyone says that. Night, the cell door opened. The same cellmates came in wearing raincoats, hiding their identities, and they handed the man the same raincoat. Everything was ready. The operation to eliminate the Emperor was starting right now. They called themselves Xena's Silver Assassins. In the corner sat 2 beaten guards. It was obvious that they had been beaten very badly. At the right dosage, the wild mushroom powder works great. It's good that they collected them in the right quantity, and the antidote works too. By the way, the moon is much brighter than usual today, and indeed, they hope that this will not worsen the camouflage. The man said it was a fine night to finally finish off the Emperor. Not far away, Emily was lying on the cold, damp floor. At some point, she stood up. As I stretched, a question arose in my head about what this fashion for sleeping pills was all about. She waved her hand over her face and said under her breath, she was tired of waiting for them all to leave. The best solution for her, while all these suspicious people were present, would be to pretend to be asleep as a child, she often pretended. But after hearing their conversations, she thought it was too serious to just ignore. An assassination operation, this beautiful night to finish off the Emperor, she thought of finding the duty officer and reporting everything to him. The dark corridor was illuminated by a beautiful white-blue light from the moon. Go outside, she looked. Hearing the conversation, the cut turned and looked in their direction. One from the inside of the palace, it was strange to them that there was not a single guard there. It all seemed somehow irresponsible. She tore off a piece of fabric from the suit that the duty officer had given her. She had to clean up someone else's problems again. She tied a tight ponytail on her head. Ryan saw his brother in the hallway and called out to him without showing it. He said hello and waved at him. Charles turned around. This was a great opportunity. In an instant, he seemed to fly towards his brother, grabbed him and swung his fist. He was looking for this little bastard. He was interested in the auction that Ryan had arranged. If at least one slave was sold at it, his brother asked him not to get excited. There is something much more important now. He needs to go out into the garden immediately. He looked at him questioningly. It seemed that Ryan was the one who set up this ambush. He told him to go out into the garden. Because he had a very interesting gift waiting for him, which he had worked hard on, Charles thought that his brother had started another stupid thing, to which he replied that he needed to show a little trust. And smiling, he promised that he would not be disappointed. While they were talking, a group of people were already approaching their destination. A guy from the group of people stopped and pulled the man up, asking him if he thought this was all suspicious. There should be a lot of guards here, but they somehow got in too easily and still haven't met a single guard. He didn't care at all, because if you think about it, they were working on Xena. Surely the elders made sure that nothing would interfere with their operations. Someone from their group saw the emperor and pointed out the place where he was standing. Charles walked around the fountain, first in one direction, then in the other. He didn't understand what he was supposed to see. At one point, he was surrounded by a gang of guys in raincoats, and he spoke some not very nice words about his brother. How dare he use him as bait? One of the guys threw a flask at him, which formed a barrier. This is a technology to contain magic and is most likely very expensive. A lot of money was spent on it. The Furza Knights' magic was truly impressive, but because they relied entirely on their runes, they could easily be suppressed by such devices. It was just a matter of power. In the end, the Emperor himself fell victim to such a simple trick, but it seems that they don't know a damn thing. The Rune Knights do not resort to third-party sources of mana because they are extremely ineffective and easily destroyed. You just need to apply more force. This seemed like complete nonsense to them, so they all jumped up and rushed at the Emperor, saying that his own pride would destroy him. Did they really think that was enough? Tom appeared on the horizon. He finally arrived at his destination, and here was the palace. When Furza finally defeated Servan and became the absolute power of the entire continent of Ashi, there was practically no industry that their hands could reach. A secret organization, Xena, has inherited the target of the defeated empire. They stopped at nothing to raise money and secretly trained professional killers. How much longer are they going to drag things out? The Emperor should have done it long ago. They need to be patient. Rushing things is too risky for them. After 10 years of fruitless waiting, their leaders have begun to turn into impatient old men with clouded minds. And yet, Xena remains the main driving force behind the revenge. Tom stood near the palace. What old idiots, he thought. The Emperor's brother betrayed him, Ryan, a stupid slacker who was lucky to be born into a good family. Why the stupid conclusions? It would be hard to find a person more devoted to Charles Furzy than Ryan. With his magic, he decided to destroy their heir. With a slight movement of his hand, he removed the magical trap from himself. Everyone around was falling. Charles found it funny. That was all they could prepare for him. How insignificant. The guards ran up. They were very worried about their emperor. They didn't understand what was happening. All the guards were suddenly gathered and ordered to wait inside, and then the alarm sounded about an invasion. He figured that nothing special had happened. His brother had simply decided to give him a gift and asked why no one had warned him. He didn't kill anyone. He just ordered them to be taken away. It looks like they were Xena's people again. Vivi accepted the order and said that she would beat all the information out of them. Lucas was extremely surprised that the garden remained intact and unharmed. Charles's mother loved this garden very much. If it had been any other place, there would have been devastation all around. But since the Emperor's mother treasured this garden, he deliberately used only the water runes so as not to break anything. And yet, even the most experienced master found it difficult to control his energy so precisely. It was a real surgical operation that only one person in the entire empire was capable of performing. He ordered that the Rhea be brought here immediately. Vivi accepted the order with pleasure and went to look for him. Lucas asked her where she thought he could be found now, but she had no idea herself. He's probably hiding somewhere from the Emperor, as usual. Ryan, the more he thought about it, the more he admired his own genius. He managed to get Xena's rats to come out of their cellars so easily, and what's more, he immediately handed them over to his brother on a silver platter. When he stood on the street, he did not expect such a turn of events. A girl ran past him. He seemed to fly towards her. He was interested in who it was. For Emily, it was unexpected. I was surprised that when she saw him, she didn't panic at all. He asked what her number was, 3,358. He pointed his finger to the side and said that if she was trying to escape, then she needed to go there. And if she ran in that direction, then she would be caught since there was a palace in that direction, and she didn't want to be accused of serious crimes. She asked what was going on in the palace, but he could hardly tell her about it. She just needs to know that the Emperor is okay. He was surprised. And also asked why exactly this interests her so much. To which he received the answer that caring for His Majesty is everyone's duty after all. They all live in the same empire. After these words, his gaze changed. It seemed to become softer. She was right. Ryan calmed her down and said that she shouldn't worry because the Emperor was in full, and before she could finish speaking, she ran away. He turned his head and didn't understand why she ran towards the palace. She's just a runaway and there's no point in worrying, he thought. To him, she seemed like a very unusual girl, because it is very rare to meet the owner of the fire rune. She wasn't even nervous when she met him, and her manner of speech was like that of a soldier. But, what is more important, he has the feeling that they have met somewhere. It hung for literally a minute. He turned sharply, as if a realization had come to him. He recognized her, because this was the same Emily Majorino whom he had visited at the estate. He was only interested in one question. What the hell was she doing here? For her, this was a good opportunity to meet the Emperor in person, to ask him all the accumulated questions, and at the same time ask him to drop the charges against her. Finally, she could at least see her husband's face. Ryan's eyes lit up and he ordered that they make sure that not a single mouse escaped from the castle today. Emily kept running. She didn't understand why no one was visible. Conversations were heard in some direction. They still haven't found him. They answered His Majesty that they have no idea where to look for him. Suddenly, in one of the alleys, she noticed him with his subjects. In joy and with the words, "I'm going, hubby," she sped up. Charles turned his head sharply as he heard someone run past. He used his magic, and blocks of ice began to form around him, sparkling in the moonlight like precious stones. By this action, he tried to protect himself from danger in connection with recent events. Scratching his head, he thought that most likely it was a rat that ran by. Lucas turned to His Majesty. "You can't throw magic so carelessly." The floor was destroyed. They would have to do some repairs now. He begged them to refrain from runes at least sometimes. It turned out that the man in the cloak and mask stopped her on purpose to remain unnoticed. She looked at him with frightened eyes, and then took a closer look. This man seemed familiar to her. It was Tom Rookin. He leaned over a little and exhaled when he saw that they were gone. He removed his mask and wondered what my lady was doing here. He was also interested in the uniform she was wearing and asked, "Have you escaped from prison? They don't want her to be charged with a serious crime." She began to approach very quickly. She wanted to ask, "What is he doing here looking so suspicious, Duke?" No, more precisely, Director Tom. His face tensed. At first she seemed just strange to him, but now it is clear that this is an extremely unusual girl. He could have guessed from the start that she was an excellent fighter. And besides, hybrid horses are not just for just anyone, but a question arose in his head as to why he had just saved her. He became curious about how many points he got today. She had already said back then in the square that you could only get a pass by scoring 90 points. Emily was surprised why he decided to ask about this. He gently pressed her against the wall. A slight tension appeared. Tom said that the Duke of the North must be strong, cold-blooded, and also mysterious and beautiful. He approached her, but first they needed to get out of here. With a huge shock on her face, she answered, 95 points. Someone laughed very loudly from behind. These two were very surprised at that moment, as if they were first graders who had been caught. They did not expect that there was someone else present here. He apologized for interrupting this solitude, but he tried for a very long time to catch up with her. They looked at him. He was touched and laughed with a hint of sarcasm, and then parodied, strong, mysterious. But these two disappeared as if at the snap of a finger. He missed her again. Ryan thought that this one, 3,358, was indeed Lady Emily. She recognized the masked man, but it didn't seem like they knew each other well. And the man next to her he began to remember. 10 years ago, right after the end of the war, Sebastian Weiner, he has black hair and red eyes. That same descendant of Servan. This year he would be 12 years old, the same age as Ryan, and at that moment he asked Charles if they would meet again or not. He swore that he would find it himself. It was only a matter of time. Ryan noticed that he had matured a lot. But then his brother appeared, which of course he did not expect. He walked straight towards him with a smile. And also, at the same time, asked if he wanted to explain what the hell he was building in the palace. They have been trying to track down Xena's people roaming the Empire for a long time, but they always slip away, and for them it is usually like a thorn in the side. But he was able to convince them that he had betrayed the Empire and met them in person. He set things up so that they would jump into their trap by giving them false weak points and vulnerabilities. While all their elite fighters were sent on an operation, he infiltrated the headquarters and smashed everything there. Thus, he managed to exterminate these rats. Charles listened attentively to his chatter, so it was because of Ryan that all the hired killers came to this particular garden. He was expecting praise from him. They started fighting, so Lucas and Vivi ran with their heels shining to avoid getting hit, since they know how that usually ends. They know that buildings may be damaged, but there is nothing they can do. Amelia assumed that it would be difficult to track them outside the castle. She turned to director Tom. He stood leaning against the wall. Emily said that the exam for the Northern Duke was passed. After these words, he covered his ears with his hands and, almost crying, begged to shut up. He already wanted to go underground. She assumed that he had his own reasons for entering the castle. So for now, suspicions were removed. Emily turned a blind eye to this quite easily, but then she was an escaped prisoner herself. And even if he were a bad person, he would hardly have saved her. She told him not to worry. That's right. He could have not saved her at first, or killed her at the very moment she began to suspect. It would have been much easier. But why is he behaving so strangely with this woman? Emily said that she forgot her sword at his place. He kept it until she arrived. But first, the best solution would be to find a better outfit for her. Someone's hand pulled the curtain. It looks like the capital is busy today. As expected, Ryan's information turned out to be false, Luke told Tom's main partner, Richard. At the moment, Xena's headquarters is suppressed. The Rukin family, besides being Sebastian's fake name and identity, was the family that became the financial backing for the creation of the corporation, Toma Holdings, when the Rukin family ran the secret funds of the Servan Empire. It's hard to believe that Xena would let such a person get close to her so easily. The secretary fully agrees with these words. Richard Rukin is one of Xena's supporters, but his goal does not necessarily involve the revival of the Servan Empire. The reason he supports the rebel forces is that one day he will revive Servan and become its ruler. He will make the Furs Empire pay. Especially Charles Furs. That damn bastard Richard will rip his heart out with his own hands. The secretary tried to somehow cheer up Sebastian. Unfortunately, he is not particularly smart, either in politics or in military affairs. He is just an entrepreneur who knows how to handle money, and the most important quality of any entrepreneur is the ability to see the value and potential of each person. Sebastian Weiner de Servan. From this day on, he recognizes him as the sole heir to their empire. However, he invests his time and money not in the empire, but in him, in His Highness. The secretary listened attentively. In other words, Richard was betting not on the revival of Servan, but on the potential of one single person, Sebastian. The gentleman said that he intended to personally observe what was happening. Luke hoped that he would not get into trouble. Sebastian is not one of those who are so easy to catch. Everything will be fine. The young master is back. With him, another lady. The secretary asked again, "Wait, what?" "With the lady." With him was a girl in a prisoner's uniform. These words struck Luke even more. He also asked what color her hair was. The master ordered that a bath be prepared for her and that clean clothes be selected. Richard didn't understand what to make of this, since he had sworn that he had no intention of being distracted from his main goal. The secretary began to reassure him. Perhaps Mr. Sebastian was already at that age to find himself a companion. This is not very critical. After all, the young man is allowed to feel a little romance. He was silent for a while, and then he said that apparently he made the wrong bet. Tom was sitting at the table with a sword lying next to him. He thought that in the end he had to bring her here. People might misunderstand him, but he couldn't just abandon her on the street, however, nothing more, and then he began to examine the sword. Once he returns the sword to her, this strange connection can be broken. He noticed that the sword was very old. He had been well looked after, but time was merciless, and he guessed that he was already over 100 years old. Everything clearly indicates that the blade is far from ordinary. It could be patched up and modified. This weapon could be a real treasure, and how could it be so carelessly forgotten? Then Emily knocked and said she was finished, and he allowed her to enter. After all, it doesn't even belong to him. He wanted to say welcome back, but at that moment he froze. Tom seemed unable to believe his eyes. She seemed to be shining, a warm bath. This is the best thing that humanity has come up with. And she thanked him for this opportunity. He was confused as to why she had suddenly changed so much. And again, this blow to the face. He handed her the sword she had left behind. Well, since the item was now in the owner's possession, she might, he wanted to say, go back. But it was already midnight outside, so he decided to give her the guest room for the night. She thanked him and said that it was very kind of him. She also asked him to devote some of his time to her. If they hadn't stolen her things, they wouldn't have gotten slapped. The men started apologizing. Finally, she got her ID back. All that remains is to withdraw the money, and she will finally be able to redeem the collateral. In fact, Tom had completely forgotten about him. After all, this whole story with the debt was only a pretext to determine her identity, but simply refusing the money was now too suspicious. He thought that there was nothing he could do, and that all he could do was take the money and forget about this misunderstanding, especially since it was unlikely to be a burden for her, since she was a noblewoman. But Sebastian didn't yet know that in the bank, which he considered the end of all the confusion, an unexpected truth would be revealed. Emily said that there was some kind of mistake and asked to check again. But their client list does not include a person named Emily Meggerino. There is simply no such person on their list. She said that she even had her ID with her and showed it. But the girl has already checked several times. Only Isaac Meggerino is listed in the Meggerino family. Emily began to insist because her name was definitely on the list. Tom tensed up. The girl began to arouse more and more suspicion. The bank employee continued her search. She picked up the folder and began running her hand through all the names. And then she voiced Emily Meggerino de Ferza. The people in the bank turned to look at her. This is some kind of nonsense, because only 2 brothers survived from the entire family. Theoretically, this is only possible if she is an empress. Could it be that there is another mistake in the documents? Tom stood there, confused. There was only one question about the head. Why didn't Emily correct it? This couldn't be true. She was invited to go inside to the Sigrid Bank's honorary guest hall. Adjusting her hair, she asked whether she was allowed to be here at all. The woman began to calm her down because she couldn't make her wait in the main hall. They had a special reception and conditions of cooperation for members of the imperial family. In fact, they didn't even know they had a new empress. In fact, Emily is just as perplexed as to why she is listed as the emperor's wife, whether it is even possible to disclose this information. What if it was a state secret? But she was not warned about anything. And in general, if it was a secret, why hasn't the emperor corrected all the documents yet? The woman was scared. Perhaps this was secret information and she shouldn't ask about it at all. The woman smiled sweetly and said that she didn't have to explain anything to her, because everyone has their own secrets. She addressed her as Your Majesty, but Emily asked to be called by her first name. And then the employee began to talk about withdrawing funds from her bank account, saying that it was impossible. The woman showed the document. The depositor calculated it for 20 years in advance. In other words, she can withdraw money from the account either when she turns 30 or with the consent of the trustee, Isaac Meggerino. How could he do this to her? She is his daughter. The thing is that she urgently needs cash and asked what other options there are. She has the right to withdraw money from her legal spouse's account. When speaking about her husband, Emily clarified that she meant the emperor. She was also interested in whether the empress had the right to withdraw state money without the ruler's knowledge. She was not allowed to. Only when it comes to the state budget, but the emperor's personal account is always available to his wife. And besides, His Majesty's property is very large. The family code recognizes common property after marriage. According to the state contract, the bank allows the spouses to manage this property. They decided to get to the point. If she wishes to withdraw money, they are ready to provide it right now from His Majesty's account. Amelia was surprised that everything was so simple. If you think about it, they started this whole mess themselves. The mistake was due to the palace's miscalculation, and what's more, they still haven't bothered to file for divorce. By withdrawing the money, she essentially agrees to compensation. Is it all worth it, since she will have to live in exile for 10 years? Tom continued to wait for her near the door. He couldn't believe what he was doing. He remembered the situation in the carriage. Emily seemed stranger and more unusual with each new meeting. Moreover, there are many suspicious moments hidden behind her eccentricity. Every time he starts to think that he understands her, something inexplicable happens again. He folded his hands in front of him. Then she came out and said, "Director." Every time this girl manages to surprise him, Emily raised her hand up and apologized for being late. She needed to get a card. Black card? Tom was so surprised that he even opened his mouth. The black card, a premium card of Sigrid Bank, intended exclusively for the most honorable clients, can be used in almost any area. They say that in the entire Ferza Empire, there are not even 10 of them. It was time for them to leave. She quickly headed towards the exit because she still had some business to attend to. He doesn't understand what's going on. The woman who was filling out her card, she heard Emily call him the director, adjusted her glasses and looked closer. She realized that it was indeed him. A man whose fortune is comparable to the budget of a small country, the director of the corporation Toma Holdings, Toma Rukin. She wondered why such important people had shown up at the bank at once. His Majesty is furious again. A record was set this month. Application rejected, Charles asked. The papers flew at one of the emperor's assistants. The fact is that for several generations, there has not been a single recorded case of divorce of the imperial family. They recently discovered that according to the law, the emperor and empress must be present in person to give their consent to the divorce, after which the certificate is sealed in a magical artifact. Charlie was annoyed that they had come up with all these ridiculous rules. The assistant suggested that they were introduced to prevent the emperor from abusing his power. He asked to bring him Emily Meggerino. The ambassador of the Meggerino family arrived, and it was reported that the Viscount's daughter had gone missing. He yelled, "You empty-headed cretins, find her," and everyone ran out of the room and went looking. The emperor stood up, placed his hands on the table, and exhaled. He was irritated by this whole divorce situation, and the girl had disappeared too. She ran away to avoid exile. Took things to the extreme, he no longer cares that she is the daughter of such a man. His only desire is to find her. Red hair, a young 20-year-old girl, and Sir Isaac, who just happened to use fire magic in battle. He remembered that girl who pretended to be a boy, and her words about what they had been fighting for all those damn years. The slave trade is prohibited in their empire. Everything fell into place. We decided to ask Ryan what you look like, Emily Meggerino. They need data to start searching because he was at the estate and saw her. He described red hair, almond-shaped eyes, slightly rounded face, naive expression. She also wore a prison uniform with the number 3358. The advisor asked to refrain from jokes because this was a direct order from the emperor, but he was not joking. Lucas decided to skip this point about the form. But he said that it was the purest truth. The advisor was surprised. Ryan asked if his words were confirmed, whether he would be willing to take responsibility for not writing this item down. Lucas tensed up after these words. Charles entered the room and asked why no one had left for the Viscount's estate yet. But he hadn't had time to prepare yet, because the order was given only a few hours ago. He needed to finish things in the palace. It was clear from the Emperor's expression that he was at his limit. Before he could use the rune, Lucas screamed in fear that he was already leaving. He quickly signed some paper. Ryan asked if he could join him and go with him to Isaac Meggerino's. He has personal matters with Shumarina. The advisor had no reason to refuse. It is necessary to hand in the leaflets as quickly as possible. This is an extremely urgent matter. Ryan could see Lucas was worried and deliberately egged him on, asking if he remembered they were in a hurry. They hope that they will not be let down and continue with their paperwork. We've received invoices for work in the gym. We need to look at them and approve them. We need to finish the work on the leaflets and send them to headquarters. This was a direct order from the Emperor. There was no time to delay. Search for extremely important person. Reward, 500,000 rubles. Prison number 3358. The boy ran happily down the street. Today he was given 2 loaves at once, which made him very happy. Suddenly he heard a strange sound and turned around. The guy suddenly grabbed him by the shirt and hung him up. He finally caught that little rat. The boy immediately remembered the one who threw the sandwich in his face. The guy didn't come alone, but with a group of friends, and added that he would somehow catch the red-haired bastard, but for now, he would deal with him. He pointed his fist at him and said that he would pay for humiliating him. The boy closed his eyes in fear. He was very scared. In an instant, Emily appeared and kicked the guy so hard that he flew back several meters. She added that if he had been in her area, she would have broken his legs, so consider it easy, but he got off easy. They didn't expect that he was being protected by nobles, so they quickly ran away. The boy thanked her for her help. She asked, "Baby, don't you remember me?" He was very surprised. The boy asked, "Are you the older brother?" First Tom waited while she was filling out the card, and now he was dragging her down the street, and why was he doing it? She handed him the bag. There was more than enough money to get to Shumarin, and she also gave him a letter that would let him into any establishment. And a little later, she would be able to take him to work on their estate. Tom watched this whole scene, and you could tell from his face that he had too many questions. The boy carefully hugged everything she gave him, as if it were the most valuable thing in this world. He also asked why she was doing this for him. She understands that life was not easy for him in his native land, and she also apologized for sending him to Shumarin again. But this is the only place where she can help him. She asked him to wait for her there. The happy boy waved his hand at her. She waved back and said goodbye. Emily was very kind to this boy, and Tom wondered if they had known each other before, but she simply repaid him with bread, despite her high-born position. From the very first meeting, it was clear that she was very different from ordinary aristocrats. Where else would you meet a noblewoman who mastered martial arts? Since childhood, she had often been at the front and probably did not notice class inequality due to her irresponsibility. Her title blinded her to the hardships ordinary people go through. But thanks to this title, she can now at least somehow help them. Now she will definitely be able to pay him back. This situation with the boy touched his heart. She bears the imperial family name, has taken part in the war between two empires since childhood, owns a rare fire rune, managed to escape from prison, and now she has also got a black card. But what is more important, what is her connection with the Emperor? He doesn't want to let her go and thinks about how to keep her. Emily said that it was time for them to go. Suddenly, Tom turned to her. As far as he remembers, he scored more than 90 points on the test. Emily didn't understand why he said that. Once he got 90 points or higher, he would be able to hold the title of Northern Duke, and then she would happily allow herself to be kidnapped. And if he scored 95 points, then consequently, he passed the test. He walked up to her and said, "You also said then that you would allow me to kidnap you. What do you say? Your offer still stands?" Emily blushed and was surprised. With a quick, sharp movement, Amelia jumped back and refused him. Jokes aside, she can't really allow herself to be kidnapped. And then he reminded her that she herself had given permission for this. She also asked what had suddenly come over him. She was interested in him, and Emily asked what happened right after she got the black card. He said that wasn't the case at all. He was afraid that they would stop keeping in touch once the debt was paid. He wants to get to know her better, but there is an insurmountable wall between them. Is there really no other way out? Emily rushed forward. Emily headed to the bank, and Tom followed right behind her. Having spent her entire childhood on the battlefield, she later enjoyed a quiet life on the family estate, graduated from the academy in Shumarin with honors, and read more than 100 novels about the Northern Duke as part of her academic work. But the experience of real relationships is zero. Emily had only one thought in her head: what a scoundrel he is. He knows that he is handsome and is now trying to seduce her. Tom wondered if she herself didn't want this, and Emily wondered if maybe she should have agreed. But it didn't matter to Tom, because he wouldn't let her go anyway. Emily had to get herself together, because she hadn't come to the capital for the sake of an affair, but to resolve the issue of a mistaken marriage. She turned and addressed him. She understands his feelings, but right now she is busy, and before she could finish speaking, some piece of paper flew right into her face. Tom could hardly keep from laughing. She asked what it was. They began to study the leaflet together. It had her photo and a reward for her capture. A young girl with red hair and almond-shaped eyes, some guy shouted on the street. Currently in hiding, wanted for committing several serious crimes. Warning, wanted person has great power, please exercise caution. Urgent decree from the imperial family, reward, 500,000 rubles. Ryan and the advisor headed to the estate. They stopped and he knocked on the carriage window. Lucas asked what happened. He got out of the carriage and felt sick. Ryan said that as an imperial advisor, he should be stronger, to which he replied that they had been racing at full speed for a whole week. What else could one expect? Ryan said that there was no point in sitting in the carriage the whole way. You need to at least sometimes get on a horse and breathe fresh air. Such long horse rides also require superhuman endurance. Also, Ryan decided to say goodbye. This is where their paths will diverge. Lucas decided to inquire about his personal business in Shumarin. What exactly brought him to such a remote place? He may see you say that he needs to check something. Lucas found this odd, as he couldn't remember Ryan ever leaving the capital voluntarily, but he had better focus on his mission. Isaac lay on the bed with a bandage on his head, waiting for him to arrive. He was glad to welcome him. He also apologized for his appearance. He is not feeling well. Lucas came to the estate to find out when Emily was last seen there. Since her disappearance, his health has deteriorated completely. He can't even get out of bed. In fact, he had a completely unnecessary heating pad and a hastily wrapped head, and his complexion is completely fine. He was just pretending, but Lucas was too smart not to realize this. There was no idea where she could have gone? He asked. Maybe he knew at least the direction, but he didn't know. She left in the middle of the night. His heart couldn't take it. If only she would be found. Lucas apologized, but he had to say it. According to Article 12, Clause 8 of their empire's law, the relatives of the imperial family are required to take all measures to protect them, which means he must use all available resources to find Emily. But only he and his daughter live in this estate. They have few servants, and it is unlikely that any of them are capable of conducting the search. Well, Lucas indicated that he has people. After all, the Order of the Knights of the Red Lion serves under his command. He began to deny it. Since his order was disbanded immediately after the end of the war, Lucas clarified, didn't the Viscount have the right to reassemble it? He looked at him angrily and said that this was exactly such a case. Even if it was a mistake in the documents, at this moment, Lady Emily, the Emperor's wife, cannot take this lightly. They are very much counting on his cooperation, Viscount, and will allocate all the necessary resources themselves. He turned away from the advisor and said that as soon as he recovers, then he will begin work. And how can he, a feeble old man, gather the knights again? His heart aches terribly, Emily. Why did she do this to her father? Lucas imagined the situation when he would tell the Emperor about this and fell out of his chair. Isaac jumped out of bed, the services in a panic, not understanding what was wrong with him. He was just tired from the journey. He suddenly felt dizzy from the long journey. In any case, the Viscount would have to obey the imperial decree. Isaac lay there and said how much his heart hurt, and Lucas said that his vision was going dark. The knight showed a leaflet and asked for the attention of all citizens. Emergency arrest warrant for Emily Majorino. If anyone sees a woman with red hair and almond eyes, report it to the city guard immediately. Emily and Tom ran into some alley and decided to take a break. What a scoundrel he is, she said, holding the leaflet in her hands. She also added that she would strangle the blonde knight from the palace with her own hands. Tom took off his coat and threw it over her. He said the situation was not easy and asked if she had a place to hide. She reminded him of his offer and clarified that it was still valid. The capital port of Temerica. He gave her his hand so that she could get down from the carriage. It upset her that everything turned out this way. At first, she was very unfairly put behind bars, because of which she had to escape. Perhaps she did the wrong thing, but is this a reason to declare a wanted person? The middleman stood and thought. The girl who had won the master's heart turned out to be a fugitive criminal. Emily was embarrassed by the way he looked at her. He pointed his hand in the direction and said, "This way. They will sail on a ship." At the moment, she can only trust this man. She clarified whether it is necessary to sail across the sea. After all, she thought that it would be enough to wait in some secluded place. He is the head of Tom Holdings. He probably has a lot of shelters, even in the capital. But this is problematic. The reward for her capture is too high to hide her. He would have to contact third parties. Some of them would certainly be tempted by such a sum. None of those people can be trusted completely and entirely. Perhaps they were even followed on their way to the port. They should hurry. She asked if they had a ship ready where they would sail to. They will cross the ocean on his ship. She looked at the boats and asked if this boat could sail that far. Tom smiled, and then he turned it the other way. He pointed his finger and said, "Here it is, his ship." He was like a majestic guardian of the sea. His smooth lines and graceful forms created the impression of grace and power at the same time, and his snow-white sails fluttered in the wind. It was equipped with a powerful magical engine, capacity for more than 1,000 people, hundreds of cabins, and all kinds of entertainment, theaters, restaurants, conference halls, and so on. Cruise liner companies, Toma Tourism, Tabo Dreambook. She was absolutely delighted because they were actually sailing on it. It seemed incredible to her. He gently and carefully took her hand and pulled it to his lips to kiss it. This flight was intended only for her. Emily tried not to show it, but she had been extremely depressed in recent days. She has outstanding courage and willpower, which helps her to face any challenges. More and more difficulties continued to fall on her head, from marriage to being accused of being wanted. Now, having boarded the ship, she felt that she could rest. Such a sequence of events would have exhausted anyone. And finally, she was able to take a deep breath. She stood on the bow of the ship and spread her arms, enjoying the moment. Tom asked what she was doing, to which Emily replied that it was every girl's dream. "It's probably too weird to ask now," she said. But Emily pulled herself together and still asked if he was afraid to help a wanted fugitive, because it was too risky for his reputation. And besides, the capital would certainly pay attention to the sudden departure of such a ship. He touched his chin and thought. And then he suggested discussing all this at the table. Tom, like a true gentleman, moved a chair for her. He just waved his hand. At that very moment, several waiters appeared and began to look after her and pour wine. He said that at the moment they were in no danger. Thabo Dreambook was on an exclusive route regulated by the Furza Empire, so there was no reason to worry. He took out a map and spread it out on the table. They are sailing to a popular spot among customers. He pointed to a section of the map that said, Duchy Floria. It is the only point in the entire empire that enjoys some degree of autonomy. The newspaper, Empire for Every Day, wrote that it is definitely worth visiting Floria at least once in your life. It is #1 on the list of the most popular resort areas. And also #1 for a honeymoon, she clarified if this is the place. To which I received a positive response. Tom asked if she wanted to reveal her true identity to him. She was a little surprised and blushed. If the girl he helps ends up being the deposed empress, he really is risking a lot. Emily sighed softly and looked up at the starry sky. He really helped her a lot, so there is no point in hiding it anymore. She decided to tell him about herself. Floria, an island located south of the mainland of Ashi. With a mild climate all year round, as well as emerald sea, gentle waves, and luxurious coral islands, it is a popular resort area among the nobility with incredible natural beauty. People call it, without exaggeration, paradise on earth. She turned to him. Duke, the newspaper didn't lie. The sand here is really soft, the word silk, and ran with their bare feet. He smiled and thought, it looks like she intends to call him Duke now. He warned her that running barefoot on the beach was dangerous, but she told him not to worry. And then she crashed into something. Sitting on the sand, she rubbed her head with the words, "Who put the pole on the shore?" An unknown man extended his hand to help her up. In front of her stood a man with light hair that seemed to sparkle in the rays of the sun, and his eyes, like emerald lakes, glowed with an inner light. He asked if she was hurt. He was the 12th Prince of Floria, and Tom told her about it. She stood up, bowed, and said that it was a great honor for her, but he said that formalities could be omitted, that everything was not so strict here. She seemed speechless when she saw his physique, which was visible through his light beach shirt. It turned out that Tom and the prince knew each other. They greeted each other. The principal assumed that this sweet girl was his companion. He plucked the flower from his neck, and he carefully tucked it into her hair. Floria has a golden hibiscus that complements her fiery red hair perfectly. He welcomed them with joy to his beautiful Floria. He hopes that their holiday will be unforgettable. Tom stood and watched what was happening. Again, his old friend took up his old tricks. As soon as he saw a girl, he couldn't stop. But he doesn't think that the prince satisfies Milady's preferences because she likes the image of the Northern Duke. Emily floated along, giggling as she asked what he meant by an unforgettable vacation. He recommended visiting the night market, but she asked if he would accompany them. Tom put his hand on her shoulder. It's time for them to go into housing. Her current outfit was not very suitable for these places, so he suggested choosing something better. She agreed with him and said, let's go now. In a romantic mood, they want to pick something in the color of hibiscus, and Tom looked at the prince with suspicion. The prince did not expect such a turn of events. Rauken Mansion in Floria. The prince opened the doors and greeted them again. He didn't understand why he came. It hadn't been 30 minutes since they had parted. Didn't the prince have important things to do? But the principal asked him not to be so cold. He asked where his companion was, to which Tom replied that she had gone shopping. She seems to enjoy putting together outfits, so it will take some time. This made him sad, because he so wanted to admire her beauty once again. Tom asked, he came only because of her. Times have changed now. But does he dare to lay claim to the woman of His Highness Servan? Tom said that she was not his woman at all. The prince, of course, would not poke his nose into their relationship. He addressed him by his real name. Interesting rumors had reached him. It seems there was a commotion in the emperor's palace. He is curious whether it was his doing, although perhaps he is not very concerned with what is happening on the mainland. After all, he wants to remain neutral. Floria, their beautiful pearl, he will not allow her to become a victim of imperial intrigues. Meanwhile, the Meggerino estate. Isaac sat in the chair, his face looking tired and a little irritated. He asked Lucas when he would stop this surrealism, but he can barely make out what he is saying. Isaac is very angry because he has been lying in bed for several weeks and has not moved. He was very comfortable. He could have spent his whole life lying there. No work. A maid entered the room and called her master. He asked why she was barging in so abruptly and what was going on. A letter had arrived from the capital, she replied. The young lady was put on the wanted list with a reward of 500,000 rubles. Lucas even jumped out of bed. Moreover, it is reported that she was spotted in the middle of the night at the port with a suspicious man. It is unknown which man, but one thing is known, that they boarded a ship belonging to Toma Holdings. Lucas said it was his fault. Things looked like they were heading for trouble. He would immediately return to the capital and take responsibility. Isaac stopped him. Sometimes freedom and wandering are necessary for growth, and he didn't want to interfere personally. Since some bastard has picked on his daughter, he can't sit back. He asked the maid to immediately prepare everything for departure he was sending to the capital. While Lucas headed to the estate of Viscount Meggerino, Guard Captain Ryan made his way to Schumarin Academy. Emily, the girl who became empress by a stupid mistake. When they first met, he thought there was nothing to worry about. However, she is somehow acquainted with Sebastian Servan. Besides, there is also some connection between his brother and her father. He just needs to find the missing pieces. The best way is to conduct your own investigation. Professor of Mathematics at the Schumarin Academy, and also the current president of the CISG, Cornelia Amber. She greeted him and asked what he came for. He was glad to meet her and clarified that she was the head of that very same CISG. In official documents, only 2 lines were written about Emily Meggerino, a graduate of the faculty of the Schumarin Academy of Architecture, and also the founder of the scientific community, CISG. CISG, a mysterious community, the goals of which are unclear, as is the exact meaning of its name. Everyone says that this is a regular student interest group. For them, the personality of a person is not as important as his passion and interest in scientific research. Freedom of scientific thought is a fundamental right of all citizens of the empire, and even the power of the emperor cannot suppress it. He asked why she was saying this. Ryan requested information on the activities and a list of all members of the CISG, but they cannot simply reveal the results of their work to them. They are interested in the purpose for which they are interested. He didn't really expect to learn anything important, but it seemed like this was not an ordinary organization at all, and he needed to figure out its basic essence first. Ryan pretended that his goal was research. He was always interested in the topics they studied here. In the entire empire, there was no more effective community in this field. She began to dig into the documents. The girl suggested conducting an entrance test. This is a basic knowledge test. She wants to make sure that he fits into their community. Ryan agreed. He was touched that a provincial professor thought there was a need to conduct a test for him, despite the fact that even the best minds of the capital's academy recognized him as a genius. She started asking him questions in order. The first question was about the color combination. He had to choose the right one. She also took a watch and began to keep track of the time. It turned out to be not so simple. Ryan thought it was some kind of code. There is a hidden meaning in these color combinations. He must choose at random. He had never heard of such tests. When he wanted to give an answer, the girl stood up and said that the time was up and he had failed it. That was the end of the test. He tried to stop her and asked if the question was correct. At the age of 11, she submitted a scientific paper on interpretative geometry, and at 14, she proved Kertm's theorem. At 17, the scientific community recognized her as a genius and awarded her the status of a scientist. However, she turned down the prestigious job in the capital and instead chose to stay at the small Schumann Academy. If rumors are to be believed, a certain area of research caught her interest. She turned around and asked if a mistake had been made. Ryan asked if the question shouldn't be followed by an explanation. She told him to pick the right combination of colors but didn't even explain what they meant. She got angry and said, "Look, my friend from the guard, did you really want to join the CISG without even knowing the basics?" Ryan tensed up. She doesn't expect him to have any potential as a researcher, but she'll give him just one chance for his zeal. She handed him a piece of paper and said, "Master the basics on your own, and then try to take the test again. This is the door of truth, which opens only to those who are ready to give themselves to knowledge." Schumann Academy Library. As he thought, this paper contains the numbering of the library books. An extremely mysterious community that does not reveal a single drop of research results and also has a strict process for accepting new members, so such a serious organization settled in this backwater. The further it goes, the more interesting it becomes for Ryan. He took a book from the shelf, The Immortal Love of the Duke of the Northern Lands. At that moment, he realized that sometimes the most unexpected discoveries can open doors to new horizons and find information where you least expect it. In addition to his primary position as captain of the guard, Ryan owns vast lands in the north of the empire. Notably, he owns them as a duke, making him a true northern duke. He was amazed by the contents of the book. "Duke, I beg you, let me go. I am possessed by the mad northern duke. How to conquer the heart and ruler of the northern lands." It was already midnight outside, and he was still sitting in the library. How stupid he was. In the face of great science, man truly becomes insignificant. He understood everything. Sebastian was chosen because of his long-standing title. In that case, he should compete to defend his right as the true Northern Duke, but unfortunately, Ryan still had a lot to learn. Charlie asked the servants why his brother had gone with Lucas, while one of them revealed the importance of his title for the first time. Another Northern Duke was enjoying a beautiful night. Tom was lost in the crowd. He asked Emily to slow down a little. She just shouted at him to keep up. It seems like today was the best day in a long time. She really liked this place. So romantic and atmospheric. The dress was so wonderful. And how can it be so beautiful, light, and comfortable at the same time? She suggested that he change his clothes, but he said that everything was fine. Like a child, she rejoiced at little things. He really liked it. Emily called him, and he thought a little childishness wouldn't hurt. There was a puppet theater, the story they will tell today. The legend of the great dragon Ashi. Long ago, when the world was filled with monsters, the dragon Ashi wanted to help a defenseless man. So together with their friend Kukas, they created a safe land for people. And as a sign of their love for the human race, they gave them, as a sign of promise, a flower capable of fulfilling wishes. The story is very similar to that of the Furza Empire, all because Floria Island also belongs to the Ashi continent. There are different versions of the Ashi dragon in all the mainland countries, including his. She didn't understand why, he said. At his, she asked if the Duke wasn't originally from their empire. As a child, he grew up in a rather poor region, and in any case, the theater came to an end. By the way, in their history, the sign of promise was a flower, and in theirs, a sword. Tom realized that he had just almost given himself away. Sebastian Weiner does not exist. His name is Tom Rukin. He told himself this thought in his sleep and in his wakefulness, so as never to reveal his true identity. They heard the shouts of the crowd and stopped. It seems they are holding martial arts competitions. It is a tradition on Floria. No runes or equipment can be used, only pure physical strength. Whoever cannot continue the fight or is outside the arena loses. In fact, it is the only type of fighting that their pacifist king approves of. The huge muscular man shouted out who of them all was ready to challenge him. The martial arts genius Ruben. Before he could say that, she probably wouldn't be interested in watching her disappear. She came out to fight him and clarified that she simply had to defeat him. He turned to her. Baby, if she wants to play, let her find another place. Here she can get hurt. In response, he received, listen, uncle, close yourself. The man's face needed to be seen at that moment. Tom came closer. It was all too unexpected. It looked like something interesting was coming. Interesting? She was definitely a noble lady. The fight began. The spectators supported them with loud shouts. She hit him with all her might. The man rolled his feet across the ground, leaving a huge mark. Ruben can't even touch her. One of the viewers asked if he just doesn't want to hurt such a cutie. Her face, she doesn't even try. Where does such a small body get so much strength from? She was having so much fun, even though it was playful. But she can swing to her heart's content, but she shouldn't finish too quickly, otherwise she will upset the audience. Finally, she got a chance to let off some steam. The crowd started to chant in displeasure. They didn't like the fact that he decided to lose this and the skinny girl because they had bet money on him to win. Shouting, I am Ruben, the martial arts genius. He ran towards her. Using magic in such fights was forbidden, but he didn't seem to care. He used the wind rune. But despite this, she dodged even such an attack. Emily was very angry because he hit her right in the chest. Ruben swung his leg at her. The crowd stood and held its breath, because no one had ever put on such a show before. The man flew very far and could no longer get up. Tom intervened in the fight and hit him, trying to protect Emily. He knocked him down with one blow, someone from the audience shouted, and others said that Ruben was a scoundrel who had just used a rune. The crowd was very unhappy with his behavior. Tom approached the judge and said about the use of runes, they are prohibited. Since he was right, he also asked that the girl be declared the winner. Anyone who enters the circle automatically becomes a participant in the battle, and now the competition is between the two of them. Tom was not happy with this news, but Emily was simply happy. Schumann Academy. There were a lot of students sitting in the assembly hall. An exam was being held. Ryan passed his test. No one had ever achieved a perfect score on an entrance exam before. In fact, the difficulty of the CISG exam is not that great. You just need to cram a huge amount of literature. Ryan was very pleased with himself. Professor Cornelia Amber congratulated him and shook his hand. He hoped for a productive cooperation. She decided to briefly tell him about the activities of their community. They are the center of study of the Northern Duchy, striving for the collection and comprehensive study of relevant literature. He inquired about the Great Purge and asked the professor to tell him more. She was surprised, because how could one not know such basic things, and asked the student to tell her. The Great Purge, an event that occurred in the 3rd year of Emperor Charles Furza's reign. Their current emperor ascended to the throne at the age of 16, immediately after the end of the Servan War, a fact that the high nobility was extremely outraged by. This led to constant assassination attempts and attempts to overthrow the emperor. But it all ended with 6 dukes and 11 marquises being left without their noble titles. This is called the Great Purge, and since then, there have been no titles higher than Count in the First Empire. Ryan clarified the exceptions. Only 2 families managed to escape the consequences of that case. The exception was the Duke of the House, Lecanois, who maintained his loyalty to the emperor, and also the Duke of the House, Bartier, also bearing the surname de Ferza. Ryan asked who was the head of the Bartier house. The girl answered, the emperor's younger brother, Duke Ryan Bartier. They are well erudite. The lands belonging to Duke Bartier are the northeastern borders of the empire, including the Zire Ridge. He put his hand on his heart and said, It turns out he is Ryan Bardier, the great Duke of the North you have been so desperately looking for. The professor and student looked at him in surprise. Cornelia said not quite. It doesn't fit. After all, the Duke must have black hair. In fact, he is a Duke. The girls began to sort of belittle him. His eyes should not be blue, but red. Besides, his character does not at all correspond to the Northern Duke. The professor shouted for them to stop the charade, and everyone sat down in their seats. Now that they've finished their greetings, she announces the schedule for this year's CISG annual seminar. Attendance is mandatory for all students in the community, especially newcomers, whose membership may be revoked if they fail to attend. Ryan asked if it was time to coincide with the day of the founding of the empire. She answered, yes, the day of the CISG seminar coincides with this holiday. Rye turned pale because he was the captain of the guard. The venue, the main hall on the 4th floor, he asked how he could leave the palace on such an important day. The city of Muta. The groom fed Shukrim, and the horse really did eat only meat. No matter how much you watch, you are still amazed by it. What a delight it was for him when his mistress left him here. At first he was a little confused. While he may not work and still receive meat 3 times a day, Emily's debt continues to grow and grow. The girl got a new horse. The horse asked if there were any more clients. She said yes. A group of travelers had dropped in to see them. It turned out that this horse was also a hybrid. The horses began to talk to each other. They knew each other. He asked Shukrim why he wasn't with Emily, to which he replied that it just happened that way. But he immediately realized that if he was here, then Isaac was with him. Isaac walked into the stable and saw a familiar face. Isaac and Lucas made it to Muta safely. The Emperor's advisor urgently needed a rest at the hotel because they were driving for 1 week instead of 2. Isaac asked where they got this horse from. The groom answered that he was here as collateral. Shukrim turned pale because Emily's father shouldn't know anything. He thought, this means his daughter owes 50,000 rubles. Everything was correct. In addition to this, all expenses for the maintenance of the collateral property are transferred to the general debt. Every day, the horse eats meat calculated for 25 people. Isa put his hand in his head, because how could one think of giving Shukrim as collateral? What is his daughter doing? She must bear responsibility for her own actions, the groom clarified, which means he does not intend to do anything. He pointed his finger at Shukrim and asked if it was the horse that had caused all the damage. The groom decided to ask if he wanted to pay off the debt with a horse. Positive answer? This is an unusual steed, a very rare and powerful creature, capable of pulling several carts without feathers. Shukrim backed away. If you send her, for example, into a coal mine, her strength will replace a whole group of adult men. Shukrim was scared and asked Alexander to stop his master. After all, only those with dragon blood in their veins can talk to them. Tom and Emily stood in a circle. The crowd was screaming and waiting for the fight. Emily was ready. Finally, she had a chance to fight. He offered to play along, but was she confident in her abilities? He is not used to giving in. We must not let our guard down. This girl is so damn strong. If she's too careless, she might regret it. Of course, this does not mean that he will seriously fight her, but he will not back down too easily either. The judge raised his hand. After he said start, Emily ran straight towards Tom. He was surprised that she was going to kick him. Before Emily could lift her leg, he grabbed it. She asked what he was doing. Tom asked her not to do that because everything was visible. He blushed. Having said open, she hit him in the chest and was very pleased with herself. Tom fell to the ground face down, and she, contented, waving her hands, began to walk away. Port of Floria. She showed concern and asked if he was too upset about yesterday. She felt ashamed that she hit him when he was distracted, but who knew that he would fall from one blow? Tom said not to worry. It was his own fault for letting his guard down. He was only interested in what she intended to do next, as he already knew, due to an error in the documents, she was temporarily considered the Empress, and when Emily went to the capital to sort everything out, she managed to end up behind bars. If she continued to sit here, the problems would not resolve themselves. That's why she's thinking about returning to the capital. Someone screamed at him to watch. There was a pirate flag. They received special permission from the ruler to enter these waters. He asked her not to worry, Floria. It is not a neutral zone. Any conflicts are suppressed here. Pirates, brave warriors, keeping in their hearts only one love, the ruler of the seas. Emily's eyes lit up so much that she suggested that the Duke go to them and promised not to create any problems. A thought flashed through his head, so she herself realized that she was always drawn to them. They can of course go, but there is one problem. Emily turned around and her eyes became very sad. There were people there. Their clothes were worn and patched, as if life itself had left its marks on them. Each of them looked around with hope and anxiety. Their eyes shining with fatigue, they looked at each other. Their suffering was tangible. The mother tenderly hugged her child and tried to calm him down in this difficult moment. She pressed him to herself, as if wanting to protect him from the whole world, which seemed so harsh and merciless. Emily asked if they were pirates, but Tom didn't have time to answer. A passing man said that they were refugees. After the Great War, many residents lost their homes and lands. People who could not settle anywhere now live on ships. No one would want to take in a bunch of hungry mouths. She asked about the flag. They don't have citizenship, so they have to wear a pirate flag so that the real pirates don't bother them. Luckily, the King of Floria understands their situation and even supplies them with supplies. Emily didn't understand. Because the ruler of Furza accepted all the surviving citizens of Servan as subjects of his empire, it was stated that no one would be expelled from their native lands. But for some reason, refugees appeared. The man turned to her and asked if she was a noblewoman. Can the misfortunes of war pass by absolutely everyone? Someone always benefits, and someone loses everything. She had a question about where the emperor could get resources to help absolutely all residents. Even if people start to complain about what to do when Furza has already seized their lands, there are no lands without poor people. The man apologized. He had said something blabbering. If they had seen enough, let them leave. This is reality. Charles Furza, he maintains the image of a war hero and a noble ruler, but his true nature is. Emperor Furza personally declared that all people in the conquered lands were rightfully considered subjects of Furza, and also said that every citizen of the empire had the right to a safe life. Otherwise, he couldn't help but say it. Emily pointed to the Duke's ship and asked him to sell it. Tom said, sure, it would be a good refuge for refugees without a home, but Thabo Dreambook is a marvel of marine engineering and an important link in the Tom Holdings fleet. Besides, yes, it costs too much, at least 20 million rubles. Emily held out a black card, and she added that she would pay immediately. Tom and the man were very surprised. They completed all the paperwork, and now the owner of the ship is Emily Meggerino instead of Tom Rukin. She addressed all the refugees and asked them to listen to her carefully, showing the document. From now on, this ship will be their home, and it is the grace of His Imperial Majesty Charles Furs. All the refugees were very happy. There was a sincere smile on their faces and some kind of relief. Sebastian had many times felt the urge to object, for example, because of the embezzlement of money from the Emperor's personal account, especially because the refugees had transferred the pirate flag to their new ship, and because, Thabo Dreambook, they had renamed Charles Furs. But what worried Sebastian more than anything else were the dubious and even dangerous cries of the refugees. However, it is now possible to legally bring charges against Charles Furs. And such an opportunity cannot be missed. Emily and Tom stood on the shore, enchanted by this spectacle, and waved their hands, seeing off the ship, a bright yellow sunset slowly descended to the horizon. Painting the sky in warm shades of gold, the waves of the waves reflected this magical light, creating a shimmering glare. A man ran into the room. He was very excited and urgently looking for Lucas. There were two subordinates sitting in the room. They asked what happened. The man stood at the door and tried to catch his breath. He urgently needed Lucas, but they said that he had gone to Shumaran on a business trip. They asked again what happened. Someone withdrew more than 20 million rubles from His Majesty's account. One of the subordinates began to be indignant, because how could they dare to touch the Emperor's property? The money was withdrawn from a black card issued for the joint ownership of the spouses. In other words, the fugitive Lady Meggerino is spending the Emperor's money. His Majesty looked as if he already wanted to kill someone. Out of spite, he had an audience scheduled for today. If they reported to him now, he would definitely finish them off. Guardian Vivi was walking down the corridor at that moment, and when she saw them, she decided to ask, "Do you have a report for His Majesty?" Problems have arisen again. They were in huge trouble and asked if she was in a good mood now. She smiled. She was in a great mood because the long-awaited guest had arrived. The Emperor sat on the throne, and here they say, "Let us welcome Isaac Meggerino." The door opened and they entered the hall. Isaac, Lucas, and their companions arrived in the capital. The two guys hiding behind the doors began to show the Emperor's personal account to Lucas. His Majesty's personal account is being robbed. Emily opened the black card. Isaac Meggerino, a former knight of the Royal Guard, he gained recognition on the battlefield, bravely led the Order of the Red Lion. After the end of the war, he was granted a noble title and the lands of Shumaran. In the Meggerino family, there remained only the Viscount himself and his only daughter, and that is where his information ends. Meggerino, the Red Lion, Sir Isaac, it turns out that this is the same daughter. But judging by His Majesty's reaction, there is clearly something else. Count Lucas reports his arrival. Isaac knelt down on one knee and bowed and added, "Viscount Isaac Meggerino arrived by order of His Majesty." The Emperor rose to his feet, adding, "Sir Isaac!" And then he took the sword and tried to strike him, but he parried his blow. It turns out that Isaac got Vivi's sword and belts. Charles was sure that he would ignore his words as usual, but this time he had some free time. It was a misunderstanding, because how dare he ignore the orders of His Majesty? Apparently, in his absence, he had improved his fencing skills significantly. Lucas doesn't understand what's going on. Sir Isaac once taught the Emperor fencing. 20 years ago, just before the war began, he resigned as commander-in-chief of the Firt's army. The Servan army has already crossed the borders of Roxine. The truce concluded in Requenois will soon expire. They are literally on the brink of war. Even his father once said that their army needed a strong general. In such a situation, where he was going to go, abandoning the capital, but he does not abandon, his sword still faithfully serves the Furza Empire. For its protection, he will make every effort, no matter where he is. He was always there from the moment he was born, but he is unable to even explain the reason for his departure. His beloved was carrying a child at that moment. He asked His Majesty for forgiveness. He is an unworthy servant. You never know how things will turn out. That same daughter became his formal wife, and how could they make such a mistake in the documents? He asked why she was wanted, but this was the first time Charles had heard about it. The atmosphere was much better than she expected. 20 years ago, he swore that he would kill Isaac the next time they met. His bloodthirstiness awakened at such a young age. The Emperor took the leaflet in his hands and examined it carefully. As usual, Lucas managed to chop wood again. The drawing, frankly speaking, is unsuccessful. It seems that this is why director Thomas suddenly sailed to Floria. In this case, it won't be difficult to bring her. He will order Vivi to prepare everything. The palace cannot be left empty. Isaac will guard it and keep order. Isaac didn't expect this. Lucas shouted that it was unthinkable to entrust the Viscount with imperial powers. Isaac fully supported him and asked him to reconsider the decision. He can't trust the palace to the idiot Ryan, and there are no direct descendants or other members of the Firt's family left. The closest person to the imperial family is Isaac Meggerino. The prince laughed loudly. The king of the pirates, Charles Furza. There will be no one who has not heard this proud name. The emperor not only gave the pirates a luxurious ship, but also sent them enough provisions to last for several years. Where else can you find such miracles of generosity? It seemed like he let his guard down with the young lady, but he said it wasn't just because of that woman. There was just a small hitch in funding the plan. Buying a plot of land in the Lurt Mountains due to the unexpected discovery of a gold mine, land prices skyrocketed. This caused some problems. There is only one place. From the Carrion side, everything will go smoothly. They are already close to the finish line. The prince asked when they will organize the ceremony of the beginning of construction. Immediately after the founding of the state, Tom answered. Several weeks have passed since their arrival in Floria. The Duke told her to make herself at home and not to worry about expenses. This place can truly be called heaven on earth, but she begins to worry that she has wasted too much time. She is worried that she still hasn't received a reply letter from her father because he should have received it a long time ago. Suddenly, someone covered her with an umbrella and said, "I apologize." It was Charles. He stood under her umbrella and added, "It was very bright today. Would she like to take shelter from the sun?" She looked at him with great surprise and even blushed and decided to ask if they had met before. He replied, "No, I think this is their first meeting." The guy seemed incredibly handsome to her, so why did he have a familiar face? While the Duke of the North is characterized by black hair and red eyes, this man is blessed with a royal combination of yellow and blue. And yet she truly only likes the image of the Duke. They were sitting in a cafe and he was feeding her spoons of ice cream. She wouldn't give in to all this. The guy walked her home. She had a good time, but her heart belongs exclusively to black-haired handsome men. Flying in the clouds and twirling a strand of hair around her finger, she sat and thought about a new meeting. He even said that he would come for her himself. The Duke drank tea and listened to her stories, and then added that it seemed like she was having a good time, considering that she had met that man for the first time. She pointed her finger at him and said that it was all because he, the Duke, was too busy to have fun and relax together. He was probably jealous. He froze in one position, and Emily sat and giggled, again the confrontation of light and dark. But it was true that he had very little free time in the last few days. But let it be he who deviated from their joint rest under various pretexts. And yet he felt uncomfortable. He wondered why she was so carefree. Was it really so easy to meet random men? Besides, she herself said that he was the only ideal, as if the only thing that mattered to her was that the man was handsome. Emily said, usually, according to the laws of Klesh, the great Duke of the North realizes his feelings too late, and the bright knight challenging him is the new fashionable trend of the entire genre. Tom was stunned, bright hair and blue eyes. He asked if she was interested in the purpose of the man who had sailed to the island, and she was a little wary that he had asked this question. He just said that he wanted to regain his health. Apparently, he even has the title of Duke. There should have been no titles higher than Count left in the Empire. There was a great purge. Purely formally, the ruler of Floria also bears the title of Duke. All this looked too suspicious. Night fell. The full moon rose, filling the world with a soft, silvery light. The moon, like a huge, luminous disk, hung in the night sky, illuminating everything around with its magical glow. This was a restless night for Tom. He had nightmares about his past. He seems to be the last descendant of the imperial family. Charles stood there, his eyes wild and full of madness, as if he had lost touch with reality. He reached out to him, the blood on his clothes, evidence of what had happened, not just traces of violence. Sebastian Weiner de Servan. He asked if he knew his name. He sat on his knees, holding the dagger in his hands, its blade gleaming in the dim light as chaos reigned around him. The dagger cold and heavy in his hand, as if it represented all the decisions and consequences that had led him to this moment. Sebastian was the son of Arya Recanois, his mother being the half-sister of Athena Recanois. It turned out that they were cousins. Now, sitting on his knees with a dagger in his hands, he realized the full weight of this discovery. How it happened that they found themselves on different sides of this situation. His angry eyes flashed with rage, and tension hung in the air. He moved forward sharply, trying to strike, his hand clenched into a fist ready to attack. At that moment, everything around him seemed to freeze. Time stood still. Charles stopped Sebastian with one hand, surprise piercing the air, his eyes widening in surprise. The whole absurdity of the situation seemed almost comical against the backdrop of what was happening. He promised to finish him off, Charles Furs. He would pay for what he had done. It seems there is no point in talking to him now. He gave him time to cool down. He should come when the scar heals. They certainly have a lot to discuss, Sebastian Weiner. He woke up from this nightmare in a cold sweat, his heart pounding in his chest, his breathing ragged. He jumped up, the images from the dream still spinning in his head, and Charles's angry eyes, the attempted blow, and the moment when he stopped it with his hand. Thoughts were flying around in his head like wild birds. Unable to find a place to land, he felt tension tightening in his chest. He said, "Damn, Charles Furza." Richard apologized for not having had time to prepare a proper reception. He did not expect that he would have to receive guests from the palace early in the morning. Isaac Mejerino decides to pay a visit to the Rukin family. Count Lucas, the youngest graduate of the Imperial Academy, holds the post of advisor to the Emperor and also bears the title of the brightest mind of the century. Since Lucas himself is accompanying him, it means that the person is really important. They came without any warning, citing an imperial decree. I wonder what's going on. Surely there was a leak after that incident, but he carefully covered up all their tracks. The thing is, his son ran away with his daughter. Maybe as fathers they could resolve this. Richard clarified, the girl with red hair. Feeling a little emotional, he stood up, pointed his finger at Isaac, and added that his daughter had been courting him herself. Tom from his earliest childhood, with such attention, Richard raised him sensibly, and all only for him to be taken away by their slob. Isaac began to defend his daughter. She is not a slob. She has her own style and natural beauty, and in general, his daughter would not be the first to seduce anyone. He can't even imagine how hard it is for him. He wakes up and hears the news that his son has sailed away with a wanted criminal. The arguments never stop. Lucas whispered something in Isaac's ear. He had just been given some details. Tom Rukin canceled all flights to Tabo Dreambook and hastily assembled a crew. Isaac didn't think his son would go so far for love. Fathers clash Mejerino versus Rukin. First round goes in favor of Isaac Mejerino. Meanwhile, in Floria, they met Charles again. He came as promised and also presented her with a beautiful bouquet of flowers. Tom stood behind Emily and watched what was happening, meeting Sebastian and Charles. At first, he couldn't believe it. But it was him, Charles Furza. To remove any suspicion that they knew each other, they shook hands and pretended that it was their first meeting. Tom suggested that Emily relax at the estate today because he was sure that the guest had already managed to admire all the local sights. He has the right to invite her friend to his villa. Tripartite meeting. Charles said that Emily had told him a lot about him. According to her, the Northern Duke can be completely trusted, Tom replied. As about you, so you sailed here to restore your health. There was tension in the room. Emily is not a stupid girl. She noticed that from the very beginning there was some strange atmosphere between these two, some kind of confrontation. Emily's fantasy theater, the love contest between the tyrant and the duke. She asked if everything was okay. Charles apologized, because in unfamiliar surroundings, he sometimes gets nervous. It seems that because of this, his old illness worsened. He asked her to buy a blue hibiscus flower. His illness would subside a little if he brewed tea from it. When she left, all the masks were removed. Charles wondered what kind of plot he was up to, but Tom mockingly told him about the illness. 10 years had already passed. He didn't think that Tom would grow up to be a hunter of other people's women. He wanted to finish him off right here and now, but he reassured himself that he had no chance of defeating him until the day of foundation. And besides, it was not worth creating a mess in Floria. Charles is offended because he told him to come as soon as his scar healed. The scar still remains. Apparently, he overdid it that time. He stood up and wanted to take a look. Tom jumped up and Charles didn't see anything wrong with it. If the scar was still there, then he would let it go without any questions. He ran away from him all over the room and thought, "What's wrong with him?" Having knocked him to the floor, Charles grabbed his leg, which looked very strange from the outside. He's still as crazy as ever. Charles felt hurt because he was his only cousin, so he tried to be gentle with him. He was forced to kill his family, his father, his brothers. Tom never cared about the rest of the family, but he will never forgive the death of his mother. Emily came back and opened the doors. She apologized for being late. She went into several different shops, but there was no blue hibiscus anywhere. However, she was told that red hibiscus has similar properties. They raised their heads and met her gaze, a hint of shame in their eyes. She froze in place. I couldn't believe my eyes. 2 men, so this is a confrontation. Tom started shouting so that she wouldn't think it was a misunderstanding, to which she replied, "It's okay, Duke." Luxury 5-star room, Floria Hotel. Charles sat on a chair and sipped his cold drink. Vivi asked Emily Meggerino in surprise right now from Sebastian Weiner. These two live together, and they are closer than he expected. It seemed Emily knew his true identity, although he was unsure. He left them together because he had to play the role of a sick duke recovering from his illness. They sailed to Floria in a hurry to find her, and then Charles sent almost the entire crew back, leaving Vivi behind. But now, instead of returning the runaway, all he did was enjoy the dates. He was simply interested in getting to know his wife better. "This girl is not a toy," Vivi said. Hadn't he heard that Emily, the youngest knight of the Order of the Red Lion, had literally grown up before the eyes of their comrades? Vivi had never contradicted him before, but now she suddenly became so serious, he didn't particularly like it. She guesses that he left her here because of her origin as a replacement for Isaac. And yet, he should not neglect Emily. She strengthened her immunity to poisons with great care and attention. The room was a real mess. Tom said it was a big misunderstanding. Their guest suddenly staggered. He just wanted to catch him, but also lost his balance. And Emily has already imagined all sorts of things for herself. Tom blushed instantly. He was really just trying to help. Emily said she wouldn't tease him anymore. However, one thing really bothered Charles. Before they return her, he needs to check something again. He entered Tom's estate wearing a suit that completely covered all parts of his body and also wore a mask so that he would not be recognized. The reason he hid his identity when contacting Emily was because he wanted to know what the daughter of the Red Lion was like. Meeting Sebastian Weiner was quite an unexpected turn of events, as he seemed to have found 2 escaped rabbits at once, so this was a very successful trip for him. He's just worried that the 2 of them are in the same bedroom. Tom stood with a pillow in his hands and defended himself from Emily. She assumed he doubted her massage skills. Emily chased him around the bedroom. Tom said that a lady shouldn't barge into someone else's bedroom like that. She replied that he could deny it as much as he wanted, but she understood perfectly well how he felt. He seemed very hurt when she started spending a lot of time with another person and telling him about it. And even when the guest arrived, he resisted him. Here one can only draw one conclusion. Every laugh of hers and every word about him was like the tip of a knife piercing his soul. Emily said that he obviously missed her a lot. Tom, feeling his heart beat faster, tried to hide his embarrassment behind a mask of imperturbability. So, she came to give him some time and also to help him relieve his fatigue by giving him a massage. Tom asked if it was really a massage. It felt like something was broken, but this technique was always practiced by soldiers. Charles stood quietly and watched. His face even turned red from the pain. Emily said that his shoulders were tight and she would fix it now. At some point he felt very awkward. He felt his cheeks starting to burn, and this added even more embarrassment to him. He pushed her away with the words, "Enough." He himself did not expect that he would react so sharply. And then he threw her onto the bed and froze right above her. The room was silent, broken only by the sounds of their heartbeats. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and anticipation, not knowing what would happen next. He felt cold sweat running down his back and his heart pounding in his chest, as if the situation was getting out of control and he didn't know how to react to it. She broke the silence and said, it seemed like it was the second time. He didn't understand what she was talking about. Then Emily recalled their meeting at the palace and added that he was rapidly improving his performance and would soon reach 100 points. In any case, he would like to relax in solitude. Charles now seems to understand what kind of relationship they have, but he can't leave without appreciating his wife's skills. She wished him good night. Before she could close the door, they tried to attack her. She has great reflexes. He stood near the door the whole time, but she didn't even feel him. This was clearly not just another petty thief. Emily spent almost her entire childhood on the battlefield. Her warrior instinct screamed that she was facing a very formidable opponent and that she needed to resort to her strongest move to survive. Charles was impressed because she used an advanced fire rune right in the room. Tom jumped up, he felt the runic magic. It was a difficult situation. He could dodge or counterattack, but that would cause a major commotion. Then that guy will start causing him problems, because if he violates the ban on conflicts again, he will be restricted from entering. Charles himself is not delighted, but there is no other choice. He must use this technique. He looked at her and began to use a technique that was incomprehensible to her. She stood and did not move, as if she was under hypnosis. Tom flew out of the room screaming that he felt strong magic. He didn't have time to finish. Tom leaned towards Emily in a panic. His heart was pounding like it was trying to escape from his chest. He quickly looked at her, trying to figure out what happened. She was lying on the floor. Her face was pale. Someone had broken into the estate, and she was worried that she had missed the attacker. She looked at her hand and realized that her magic had been stolen. She couldn't use it. Tom laid Emily down on the bed, carefully adjusting the blanket. Rune Moras. That's the name of the spell that was cast on her. The user needs to draw a star in the air. Rune magic basically draws energy from nature. Its use, unlike magic stones, usually cannot be interrupted. However, the Rune Moras is able to forcibly suppress the flow of runic energy. Thus, that person protected himself from her fire magic. For now, she will not be able to use the rune, but over time, the energy will be restored itself. She was worried whether her magic would really return, since this was the first time she had encountered something like this. Emily tugged at his robe as if to stop him and said, "Duke." The next question was how long he would call her, "Milady." Can't they already be considered friends? And ask to call her simply by her first name? Tom tried to pull himself together. The most important thing now is to establish the identity of the attacker. The spell, Rune Moras, cannot be mastered by just anyone. To completely block enemy magic, it is necessary to use 5 elements at once: theme, water, wind, fire, and earth. In other words, it would require the concerted efforts of 5 experienced mages at once. But in the Ferd's Empire, the owners of the runes of darkness and earth have practically disappeared, and the spell of the Moras runes itself has not been used for at least 100 years. There is only one person on the entire continent who could use this technique alone. A look full of contempt seemed to pierce everything around, leaving behind a feeling of cold detachment, eyes narrowed and full of anger and discontent, leaving no chance for understanding or sympathy. The mage of the 5 elements, Charles Furza. He had already paid them a visit earlier, apparently to check out the situation, and now he had also left a warning. But I wonder how he knew this spell. The plan remains unchanged. Charles Furza will be killed before the end of this year. The next day, he came to their house. When Tom opened the door, his only thought was how this bastard had the nerve to come here. He had no conscience at all. He shook his hand and added that he had already dropped in on them at night. It seemed he had a lot of free time. To which Charles replied that he was confusing something, because yesterday he had definitely come to them during the day, and not at night. Moreover, he had a preliminary agreement with Emily. He's very sorry, but she's not feeling well today and he'll have to leave. Last night some crazy bastard broke into their place. Emily appeared from behind him, smiling from ear to ear. She clearly looked healthy. Tom was surprised and asked how she felt. When she woke up, it was already light. She even had time to tidy herself up and change her clothes. She showed off her outfit and asked if she looked good, to which she was told, "Just wonderful." Tom wished them a good time, but Charles invited him to join them. Charles had something to tell my lady today, and perhaps Tom should hear it. Tom looked at him suspiciously, as if searching for hidden intentions behind his words. They came to a luxurious restaurant, where the soft light of the lamps created a cozy atmosphere. They were brought dishes. The plates were decorated with bright colors and exquisite compositions. They seemed like real works of art. Tom sipped his champagne and looked at Charles, wondering what he was up to. Suddenly, Charles decided to ask Emily if she had ever heard of a man named Sebastian Weiner. Tom choked. She nodded and said, "One of the princes of the Servan Empire." As far as she knows, at one point this scoundrel was already in the hands of the emperor, but Charles Furza simply let him go. Her father was very angry about this. He said, "Yes, that's right. Your father, Viscount Isaac Meggerino." She never understood why they needed to start this war at all. The very thought makes her feel uneasy. After all, Emperor Servan, that his children are all the same. Emily even jumped up and said emotionally, "Now he's walking around somewhere freely. It would be worth finally catching him before this scoundrel does any more harm." He laughed until he cried, and also agreed with her opinion that he should be dealt with on the spot. Charles decided to ask Tom. He was originally from the Furz Empire. He nodded. Emily covered her mouth with her hand. It turns out she mistakenly called him Duke. Everyone knows about the Great Purge. His Majesty once destroyed all the holders of titles above count. She also added that their emperor can sometimes be a real psycho. Her father had served His Majesty for a long time. Every time the conversation turned to the emperor, he began to turn pale with fear. Just imagine how scary this man is. Right now she can't go back to Furza because of the emperor. He is a very wise ruler. But you shouldn't get caught if he holds a sword in his hands. There are rumors that he once slaughtered a bunch of nobles right in the throne room. Charles said he didn't want to leave traitors alive. However, all this is nothing compared to the massacre on the Carrion Fields. In that battle, the emperor ended the war, but he interrupted her. Since we were talking about her father, did she know that he was currently in the capital? Emily asked. "Are you acquainted with him?" "Yes, and quite well, moreover, he has a connection with the imperial family, and therefore invited her to return with him to the capital." Tom was shocked by this proposal. He wanted to stop her. But was there any point in interfering with this? All this time, he was just a companion. He was her protector. Feelings were fighting in his heart. On the one hand, the desire to protect her. On the other, the understanding that everyone has the right to their own choice. This woman was stranded on the island due to the persecution of Charles Furz. But then, he remembered that night where Emily asked if they couldn't be friends anymore. Tom said that it was indeed time for her to go back, but he would stay because he still had some things to finish. She said hesitantly that she would have to leave someday anyway. Charles stood up and said that he then proposed no delay. Emily was surprised that he wanted to sail now, but was there any reason to delay? Her things were left at the Duke's estate. Charles asked her not to worry. They wouldn't send a man to take them. It was time for her to return home. She, of course, understood that she needed to return, but she didn't expect it to happen so suddenly. Tom stood up and leaned his elbows on the table, his face looking desperate. They didn't even really say goodbye. She gently pushed Charles away and asked him to wait just 1 minute. Emily turned around, called him, and thanked him for all his help. She also promised to repay him as soon as she arrived in Mutu. Tom smiled and waved at her, saying, "See you later, Emily." Charles took Emily's hand and they headed towards the exit. Super fast ship, Hermes? Equipped with a magical engine of the highest power, embodying the technologies of the continent, this genius of engineering thought is able to cover a distance in just 3 hours that would take other sailing ships a whole week. It is rightfully considered the fastest ship in the Empire, which impressed Emily greatly. It seemed incredible to her. Charles was glad that she liked it. She had never sailed on such a fast ship. Did it really belong to him? Emily asked. She spoke enthusiastically that he had both beauty and money, and that overall, he was a lucky man. He has a pretty good income and is not without influence. Such phrases usually cause disgust, but he is a truly impressive figure. He folded his hands behind his back and added that he might be able to influence even her problems with the imperial family. They both turned to watch Floria go. Tom stood on the shore of the pier and watched the ship sail away, his heart filled with mixed feelings. He tried to reassure himself that he had made the right decision. Tom understood that he had his own goals and plans that required time and effort to achieve what he wanted. In any case, this issue should have been resolved peacefully. There was no need to wind yourself up with unnecessary thoughts. The old man addressed him by his real name. He didn't expect to meet him in such a place. Tom's eyes lit up. How dare he call his name so unceremoniously? He barely survived the Xena disaster, and now he dared to come to him. It seems that his long life has taught him nothing. The old man clarified that His Majesty was indeed going to turn away from Xena. Apparently he didn't understand the situation. Whoever allowed these idiots to carry out that insane operation, they themselves are to blame for allowing the organization to be destroyed. It seems like he's still planning to carry out his own plan, but he knows that Charles Furza just left Floria. With a cry of, "It's all over," the old man threw down his cane to show him who truly serves the great empire of Servan. Charles Furza would never set foot on the continent again. A huge flash of blue light appeared on the ship. Emily asked what was going on, if this thing was going to explode. It was interesting for him, apparently because of the pleasant atmosphere he relaxed too much. The most powerful and influential man in the Furza Empire is also the man with the most enemies. Wherever he is, and whatever he does, he never has the right to forget that there is a knife at his throat. They overloaded the control unit of the magic engine. Everything here will explode soon. He made a mistake and should have done a more thorough check. And yet, whoever did this was very naive to think that he could be removed with such a pathetic attempt. Such mechanisms can be easily destroyed. Activated runes could no longer be cancelled. When two different advanced level runes collide, a powerful explosion occurs. The flames flared up with incredible force, wrapping around the ship's hull in tongues of bright orange and red. Sparks flew in all directions like stars breaking out of their celestial home. A thick cloud of black smoke hung in the air, which quickly filled the space around. The ship sank to the bottom. Vivi was sailing on the accompanying ship. She shouted their names. Charles pulled Emily out of the water by the scruff of the neck. Hours ago, moments before the terrible explosion, Charles created a protective barrier and distorted the shockwave. And at that moment, Emily realized. A man capable of using at least 2 different runes at an advanced level, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and said to be close to the imperial family of the Duke. This man was none other than the Emperor himself, Charles Furza. Everything went wrong. But first we need to save the girl. Emily threw herself into the water and began to swim away, and he chased after her, not understanding why she was doing this. If she is caught, she will be accused of insulting the Emperor, and in the worst case, she will be charged with attempted murder, which is tantamount to the death penalty. He shouted that if she floated away, she would be sentenced to death. They sat on the sand and watched the sunset. Emily turned to him. "Your Majesty." Since the Emperor was sitting next to her, she immediately began to fuss and make a fire. He smiled and told her to relax and think about what to do next. She suggested that at dawn, we should look for the surrounding area and housing. Most likely, they ended up on an uninhabited island. A small island surrounded by crystal clear ocean waters, a white sandy beach gently framing it. Ryan successfully completed his mission in Shumarin, and after a few weeks, he returned to the capital. There was some kind of running around in the palace. He was greeted. Lucas and Isaac walked towards him. Ryan remembers him declaring that he would never come here. He wonders what brought him to the capital. Lucas began to fill him in on the situation. It turns out that his brother personally went to Floria to return Emily Meggerino. Therefore, all the work that he abandoned, that is, that His Majesty entrusted to them, must be completed. They hope that with his arrival, the work will go better and faster. Sir Ryan ran and the two tried to stop him, but he used a rune. The first day on the desert island, he used the rune and made sure that there was no land or other islands nearby. It was difficult to determine how far they had deviated from the course, and there was no way to contact the capital either. They urgently need to figure out how to get out of here. Emily, screaming, "Your Majesty," ran up to him holding a huge green snake in her hands, saying that she had gotten them breakfast. He suggested looking for some fruits, for example, on palm trees, but she said that it was much better to eat meat to have strength. She asked him to wait a little bit so that she could cook it very tasty, but he refused. Now they should think about how to get off the island. Since the island was uninhabited, they could neither get out nor contact anyone. She asked what if they were stuck here forever. He believes they will spend the rest of their lives together. She asked, together with His Majesty, until the end of life, to which he asked in response, "She is upset." She thought she had fallen into a genre of confinement. He didn't understand. Objectively speaking, no one is holding her captive, so confinement is not suitable. Usually in this genre, a dungeon or, at worst, a bedroom appears. Charles finds this woman increasingly strange. Emily had set up a shelter very quickly, and she was a good hunter. He had to admit that her survival skills were impressive. Moreover, she knows about 3 lines of smoke that signal the need for rescue. I guess it was Isaac who taught her everything, even better than he expected. They heard some sound and looked closer. There was a ship there, and apparently the people on it noticed the distress signal. It seemed that luck had smiled on them. Emily was jumping up and down and screaming to be noticed. Someone answered from the ship. Before them is a majestic ship, the Charles Furza, the next in line of the great pirate king, and they are ready to support them without any conditions or discrimination. Be grateful to the mercy of their great pirate king. This was something new. Since he had ascended to the throne, There had been many attempts to overthrow and humiliate him, but for anyone to use his name without his knowledge, moreover, it was some kind of dirty gang of pirates. Emily noticed that he started using the rune and stopped him. They are not pirates at all, but refugees. They are good people. He asked how she knew this. She bought this ship with His Majesty's money and gave it to good people. Charles turned white and asked with his money. She showed him the black card. He put his hand on his face. What was she thinking when she arranged this? In the first letter, they themselves wrote that her family was entitled to generous compensation, so she thought it would cover all the expenses. But she hadn't received the money yet. Moreover, why spend it on refugees who were not connected to her in any way? All these people lost their homes because of the war. She understands that it is impossible to make everyone happy. But at least she wants there to be fewer hungry and homeless people in the world. And she is sure that His Majesty would also want this, so she asked not to execute her. Even if he cancels the compensation, she will try to return all the money. He laughed and said, well, I don't know. She is a magnet for trouble, and yet there is a desire to get her. These words surprised her. The man in the boat swam closer to the shore. Emily stood and waved at the man, and Charles took her by the waist with one hand and asked for forgiveness. He added that now it was his turn. She looked at him with incomprehension. Charles took her in his arms, but did she ask to call His Majesty by her name? The boat was of no use at all, since he used rune magic and walked across it as if it were the ground. Having put Emily down on the ground, he looked over the carriage. Everyone looked at him. An advanced rune, a blonde man with blue eyes. It looked like the emperor himself was in front of them. He added, it turns out that he can consider himself the captain of their ship. The pirate king has descended from the heavens, and even the heroine was with him. She pointed her finger at herself in surprise. One man even shed tears. He always believed that one day he would visit his people. This was all, of course, wonderful. One of the sailors ordered to bring something. Charlie decided to change his clothes. Pirate king hat, Pirate King belt, Pirate King cloak, Pirate King full set. Everyone started praising him. The outfit was to his taste. Not bad at all. These people know how to please the king. They decided to entertain the Pirate King, to show off their talents. One of the sailors rode a unicycle and juggled at the same time, and the other could balance plates on his head. Charles enjoyed this performance. One granny came up to me and said that she could predict my fate. Emily immediately ran up to her. You can tell everything from the line on her hand. The old woman took her hand and began to look closely. This line promises unexpected wealth. Emily started jumping up and down and asking to see her fate in love, at which point Charles asked for her card back. She walked up to him with a guilty look and held it out to him. They had very little time. The old lady continued to study the line and said that a wonderful union was definitely awaiting her. She asked about the Northern Duke, which the emperor did not like at all. The old woman also added that a moment of happiness would be followed by a long shadow of loss. All this is very tragic. Why is her thread of life connected with someone who is no longer alive? These words were incomprehensible to anyone. She held out her palms to see the Pirate King's fate line. Fate is such that it cannot be changed. The connections and lives of each of us depend on the great wheel of fate. The future is set invariably. When the old woman said, "Great wheel," Emily thought it sounded familiar. Charles refused because he does not accept fortune-telling. The emperor wrote something on a piece of paper, and then he took the seagull, attached it to her leg, and sent her on her way. It's about a 2-hour drive to the base in the Bourbon Strait. The sailor changed course as ordered. Charles called everyone on deck to give orders. All the people stood waiting. He looked at each of them thoughtfully. He sent one sailor to the right. He sent the other one to the left. He ordered the third one to take the barrel, and then sent him to the right. When Emily came up, you didn't understand what was happening. Whatever the case, it doesn't look like he's going to return the ship. One of the sailors brought a glass of water on a tray to treat her because it was very hot outside. Calling her a heroine, she asked not to worry about her, and she was not so big to be called a heroine. Life rejected and despised, thanks to her she found peace for the first time. This ship was bought by His Majesty, the King of the Pirates. Her role was only to persuade. And yet at the origins stood Amelia, a respected heroine. They are both great benefactors. The sorting was finished, so there was an announcement ahead. Emily and the girl turned around. The crew, Charles Furs, up until this point, they had been carelessly enjoying his protection. If that were all it was, it could be called a humanitarian mission. But they have no right to call themselves pirates. The situation was getting heated. With such a large pirate ship sailing calmly in their waters, and with the respect of the Pirate King, he was about to voice his only order. Bourbon Naval Base. The commander of the Bourbon Base, Admiral Wilson Nile, received a personal order from the Emperor. He could not believe that this order was real. It was unclear to the Admiral why His Majesty had given such an order. From now on, not everyone is under his leadership. They will become real pirates. Baron of the Black Coast of Bourbon and Admiral of the Fleet of Furza, Wilson Neal has defended the waters of Furza for many years, an experienced general preparing for a well-deserved retirement and one of the Emperor's most loyal confidants. But more than anything else in the world, he despises these parasites of the seas, pirates, so this assignment was simply incredible for him. He was ordered to arm a pirate ship that was about to arrive at Bourbon's base. He won't give these pirate bastards a single potato. His Majesty would never have given such an absurd order. It is probably a forgery. Someone imitated the Emperor's handwriting. Or he was forced to write it under threat. One of the assistants burst in shouting, "Admiral!" At a distance of 150 meters to the southeast, a pirate ship is approaching along the strait. Judging by its size, it is a giant sailing ship with a displacement of 10,000 tons. There is confirmation that a magic engine is installed on it. The Admiral could not believe that the decree was really real. Small fish swim into the shark's mouth by themselves. All troops prepare ships for combat readiness. Their goal is to safely rescue His Majesty. It is time to show the power of the Furza Navy. Charles laughed and asked, "Salvation?" The general fell to his knees and raised his sword up. The Emperor thought it was very cute, and the Admiral had a wonderful imagination. If this continues, he will become an emperor who dies at the hands of his loyal general. The Admiral's two assistants looked at everything that was happening, as if slightly condemning it. They never thought they would live to see the day when they saw a pirate ship being armed. I wonder what is going through His Majesty's mind at this moment. The Admiral turned to Charles. He would not dare to doubt his wisdom. Supporting the pirates with weapons was not the best idea. He smiled. It seemed to him that the Admiral was scared. Judging by the state of their ship, the crew seems completely untrained. Give them a gun and they won't even know how to use it, let alone fight. The general was absolutely right. But they have two problems. First, the fleet is now too weak to cope with the pirates. After the victory, they significantly expanded their territory, but barely have time to protect the surrounding waters. The second problem was his own resignation, to which the general responded that it was indeed time for him to give way to the younger generation. It is quite possible to solve two problems at once. He took off his cap. Then he removed the captain's hat. From today on, Admiral Wilson Nile will become the king of the pirates. There was surprise on everyone's faces. Charles pointed to the ship and said that this was an order and he would board that ship. He will also train people he selects to rob pirates. An eye for an eye, a pirate against a pirate. The great ship Charles Furza. This ship will be the first privateer vessel in the history of the Asha continent under the patronage of the Emperor. These warriors, who were refugees until recently, will now become heroes of the seas. And they will be commanded by the legendary one-eyed Captain Nile. But this story is still waiting for its time. A little later, in the imperial capital of Furza, they finally returned to the capital. The father saw his daughter. Emily couldn't believe her eyes, and they ran towards each other with open arms. He asked what she had done, to which she replied that if he had not blocked her accounts, she immediately grabbed him by the vest. All the servants, as well as Lucas and Ryan, approached His Majesty. They told him that an urgent message had arrived about the explosion that had occurred. They were already going to send a search party to Bourbon's base. If there had been no news by the evening, the explosion was not powerful enough to pose a threat to His Majesty. Charles suggested that they deal with the most important thing first, his runaway bride. This fugitive is the current empress. She was wanted for escape and fraud, forged his name to open a joint account, and stole millions of luels. Charles shut everyone up. There is a lot to discuss, but first, we need to start with the main thing. Before any more interference arises, he wants a divorce immediately. Emily became scared. Father and Lucas were almost in tears, because finally the matter was moving towards the end. The first conference hall of the Furza Empire. They decided to skip the formalities. Everything is simple. He and the lady agree to a divorce and write it down on a magic stone. She must remain silent, and then he will agree to all her conditions, privacy, compensation, whatever. She smiled and said, "Your Majesty." All the moments she had experienced during this time flashed through her mind. No one will believe her anyway. Lucas ran into the hall in a panic. He was holding some paper. He apologized for the sudden intervention. And he also said that they can't get divorced. Daily Furza, Special Edition, exclusive report. The Emperor's secret lover. 3 years ago, they overcame the difference in status for the sake of love, generous gifts, including luxurious magic ships. Where this money came from, even the Emperor's closest confidants knew nothing. Will they really announce the Empress of Furza soon? Lucas asked one of the servants to leave and not let anyone into the meeting room. Now they need to find out who the informant is. But while the search has been fruitless, security is already dealing with this issue. Emily suggested explaining everything as it was, saying that it was just a mistake in the documents, because of which they were listed as married. But this turned out to be more than just a gossip column. The marriage registration error occurred exactly 3 years ago. The article clearly states that they started dating exactly then, and also hints that the gifts were paid for from the imperial budget. This article was probably written by someone close to the palace with the intention of deliberately undermining the emperor's reputation. If an explanation is given now, or a divorce is hastily completed, they will make the situation seem as if the emperor had secretly brought in a new empress for them, and then hastily kicked her out. For now, this will be perceived as another piece of gossip, but in the future, it will be more difficult to hush up the matter. Charles turned to Emily. The situation was serious. "We'll have to stay in the capital until things settle down." She had some strange premonition, namely, that it would not be easy at all. Vivi said the information didn't leak through the banks. The head of the bank does not seem like the type to give away palace secrets, although the fact that Lady Measurino's name was included when the account was opened might have attracted attention. The head of the bank assured that none of the transactions could be viewed by outsiders. Ryan ordered a search of the editorial office, the Daily Furza, to take only the most reliable people and to reduce the number to a minimum. If you act too openly, it will arouse suspicion. Scandals around His Majesty happen almost every day. People do not take it seriously, considering it ordinary gossip, once she asked the emperor whether it was worth reacting to false rumors in the press. And he said, "What difference does it make? You have to ignore them, and they will disappear on their own, so everything has remained that way until now. But this time, it is not a fiction. The situation is ambiguous." He had a bad feeling. First, the explosion of the ship in Floria. Then, as soon as they returned, the rumors of an affair. All this, a week before the founding day of the empire. Perhaps there is some organization behind it. Ryan ordered an investigation into the treasury and administrative services. Vivi accepted his order. They brought the papers to Tom, and he asked whether the information was reliable. Luke replied, yes, they were verified by a reliable source. This meant that the cruiser that Emily and the Emperor were on exploded, shattered into pieces, and they were rescued by pirates from the ship, Charles Furza. Luke answered him positively. They were silent for a minute. Luke himself double-checked several times. When this woman is involved, everything goes wrong. But if we are to believe what the old man confessed, the engine explosion was not strong enough to destroy the ship, and that is why the vessel was completely destroyed. He told Luke honestly what he had done, and at first Luke thought that he simply would not obey orders anymore. He did not answer of his own free will. Luke tensed. He didn't know what to answer. Tom handed him a handkerchief with a symbol on it. He wondered if he had ever seen it, but he just shook his head. The old man who carried out the sabotage was watching the situation from the pier, and he says that someone in red clothes handed him this handkerchief. Now they need to find out who it was. Luke took the handkerchief and said that he would look into the matter. He thought he had seen this symbol somewhere before. Eric looked out the window. There was only a week left until the day of the celebration of the founding of the empire. They had spent more time in Floria than they had expected. Now they need to focus on business. The woman was smoking a cigar and was still under the impression. The president of Furza's largest company, Thomas Holdings, seemed such a young and charismatic man. And he was surprised that she, the largest landowner of Rilt, was also such an elegant lady. She thanked him for the compliment and became embarrassed. Now everything depends on her last step. He put the document on the table. Once she signs it, the deal is complete. She looked carefully and thought, for her, this is an extremely profitable deal, but she still has something that worries her. The Rilta Mountains are barren, dangerous lands. Even tourists don't go there. When he said he was going to build a resort in the area, she thought he wanted to buy cheap land and make something worthwhile out of it. But gold had recently been discovered there, and prices had doubled or tripled. Despite this, he insists on that particular plot and its size. As if we can't live without this land. Tom asked if she had changed her mind about the deal. Of course, she didn't change her mind. Mr. Riken was successful in everything he did, so she thought maybe he had a brilliant idea that she could join in with. This land was still a burden to him. There was no gold mine there. He turned to the woman and asked about the symbol on the scarf. She happily agreed to tell. She became interested, he is also interested, in the Church of Happiness. The Church of Happiness, the state religion of Furza, is a cult of creation, but freedom of religion is allowed. It seemed to him that this was a sect, which had recently been gaining great popularity. All the serious people who knew a thing or two about money were already there. Nobles, high-ranking officials. She decided to tell them a little secret. The man who brought her to the Church of Happiness is a real giant in society. This man, Prince Eugene Weiner himself, the last heir to the vanished empire of Servan, one of the highest members of the Church of Happiness. It was a strange turn of events for Tom. He asked her if she was sure, as far as he knew, Eugene Weiner had disappeared after the war with Servan. She personally saw everything with her own eyes. He was introduced to her when she joined the Church of Happiness. She also added that Tom looks very much like him. He also has black hair and red eyes. If he wants, she can introduce him to her, because the descent ceremony will begin soon. They handed him a piece of paper and asked if he really wanted to meet with them right away. Maybe it would be safer if they investigated first. Black hair and red eyes, this is rare. He may be a member of the royal family of Servan, Luke said. But besides him, all the other members of the royal family, he was silent for a second. They all died during the war with Charles Furs. He suggested that there might be surviving relatives, or it could be someone from a distant relative on the mother's side. Luke asked if this was his relative. What was he going to do? First, it would be better to find out what he wanted. The gentleman always loses his blood when it comes to his mother. After all, his real goal is the restoration of Servan and revenge on Charles Furs. Especially revenge for his murdered mother. A dressed-up man greeted them with a smile, introducing himself as Sebastian Weiner. This is not what Tom and Luke expected to see. After all, Tom doesn't look like him at all. Even at first glance, it's clear that his hair is dyed. Does everyone really believe that he is the real Sebastian? The guy saw doubts in his face. But at first, many doubt. As soon as he showed the power that only the royal family of Servan had, Tom tensed up. Anyone in Fertz knows that runic magic is divided into 5 elements: water, wind, fire, earth, and darkness. Runes of darkness, a power available only to members of the royal family of Servan. The guy decided to ask them how much they knew about the runes of darkness. They do not summon pillars of fire or lightning from a clear sky, but they can control the mind, memories, and feelings of a person. For fighting people, this is a powerful force. The demonstration is over. He winked and asked if they believed him now. They found it difficult to describe their emotions. Tom asked Luke to go out. For Luke, it all seemed too suspicious. The guy looked at him questioningly. After contact with the rune of darkness, people usually lose their minds. I wonder why he is so calm. That's right, now it's clear why they believed him. It is believed that the runes of darkness are only available to the royal family of Servan, although, in fact, such abilities are found in other people. Most, like him, can only fake the magic of the runes. The people of Furza have never seen real runes, so the deception is easy. The guy only pretended that he did not understand anything. Tom decided to demonstrate to him the power of a real rune. He also asked how he felt. Whether it was difficult for him to keep his eyes open, fear seemed to be tearing his heart apart. This is the real rune of darkness. Now it's his turn to ask questions. He was interested in what the Church of Happiness was, and what the descent ceremony was. Luke hoped that Tom would be able to control the power. He was also curious about why he was pretending to be Sebastian, and ordered him to tell everything he knew. Meanwhile, in the palace, Lucas stood at the board and said that for now, this is all that could be found out. The identity of the journalist who wrote the article and the informant from the palace are already known, but both are currently absent from the capital. The journalist has disappeared completely, and a finance ministry employee recently took an extended leave of absence. They have one thing in common: both actively promoted the Church of Happiness. Civil servants can change their religion from the state one. His Majesty has allowed freedom of religion. Finance Minister Robert asked why he decided to take a holiday in the middle of the holiday, to which he replied, "The Church of Happiness," supposedly holding an important event in the north, which seemed strange to him. Because what kind of organization in Fertz organizes holidays that overlap with the Foundation Day? Ryan asked what the Church of Happiness does. This is a new religion that appeared a few years ago. They preach happiness for everyone. We believe in the power of happiness. They have many temples throughout the empire. They do charity work and donate money. The cult of creation, this is clearly not approved. Ryan thought about it. I wonder where they get the money from. Luke came into the office and asked how everything went. When the guy comes to, he won't remember anything. Also, Luke apologized for only now remembering. He held out a handkerchief and added the symbol of the Church of Happiness, which he had seen on the badges of several noblemen. He wondered if there were any results from the interrogation. When he comes to his senses and expresses a desire to join the Church of Happiness, if he says that he is interested in the teaching and wants to donate, the reaction will be quick. He wants to study this religion more deeply. Her name is Emily Megerino, and she used to live in a secluded place called Shumarin. However, now in the Imperial Castle, one day, out of the blue, she became Empress. And it is because of this that she has to go through hell. She thought that after all the events, they would finally get divorced. But problems arose within the emperor's family. Lucas can confirm that the only person who had contact with the journalist was an official from the department in the Ministry of Finance. It would be better to postpone the issue of divorce until the investigation is completed and remain in the castle, hiding his identity. She's not sure what's going on, but it seems like she's being told to stay here and not go anywhere. Thus, she disguised herself as an imperial guard, thinking that a young girl walking around the castle would arouse a lot of suspicion. And since then, 5 days have already passed. Everything here seemed very boring to her. She can't even move from her place because she will be immediately returned to her place. The imperial family is busy preparing for the ceremony to mark the founding of the empire. After the ceremony, public interest will die down. There's no point in trying so hard to disguise herself if she's acting up. And he also called her Max. But she never told him her nickname, so then that detective was His Majesty. But the color of the hair and eyes were different, she quickly realized. Charles asked not to tell anyone about what happened then. She asked if he had forgotten anything, and then she reminded him how he promised to feed her delicious meat if they met again. But for some reason, she never saw the meat. From now on, only meat will be served at all meals. This is an order from His Majesty. She even thought that maybe life in the emperor's family was worth it. So what is the foundation of an empire? In an ancient legend, the great dragon Asha promised to make a covenant with people. In Furtz, in honor of this, the most grandiose festival is held 10 years ago after the victory over Servin. This also became a celebration of victory. An imperial ball is held, to which VIPs from all over the continent are invited. They say that dancing and singing there did not cease for a whole week. Living in remote Shumerin, this didn't really concern them. They say that many ladies dream of receiving an invitation to the ball of the founding of the empire. Well, Emily is from a completely different world. She thinks she would be much more interested in sitting in her room and reading new editions of The Grand Duke of the North. Lucas and Isaac were measuring clothing sizes. In any case, it looks like the imperial family is indeed busy preparing for the ceremony. Emily saw familiar faces. She couldn't believe her eyes. Amber entered the palace. There were 2 other girls with her. They all opened their mouths and then shouted Max. Leah Helen, Vice Chair of the Northern Academic Society. Montre, Secretary of the Northern Academic Society. Cornelia Amber, Chair of the Northern Academic Society. Full Executive of the Northern Academic Society. Emily was curious about how they ended up in the capital, and especially in the palace, to which Amber replied that it was just the time for the Northern Academic Society seminar. The new member of the society, Ryan, officially invited them. Thanks to him, the seminar would be held in the palace. As he understood, the eldest, Emily, is the founder of the community. Without thinking twice, she grabbed him by the clothes and dragged him along with her. Pressing him against the wall, I asked him what he was up to. It seems they had a misunderstanding. He only found out about it now. New members are required to attend the seminar, but since he is the head of the guard, he cannot leave the castle, so he invited them here. The task, the type of narrative, the emperor orders his betrothed to go to the battlefield, where she will surely die, as he would have done. The correct answer would be to stage a coup with the Northern Knights, overthrow the emperor, establish power, then win the war and offer the position of empress to his betrothed. She was pleasantly surprised that he was really a member of the community. She even thought that he was checking her out. Amber, Leah, and Mon called her. They asked her questions. Did she become an imperial guard? Was she friends with the commander of the guard? Did she know that she would ever achieve something? Ryan walked up to her, hugged her, and said, "Yes, Guardian Emily is the new apprentice knight." The uniform suited her very well. It seems that preparations for the ceremony are complete. All invited guests arrived in the country. Seeing Emily through the window, Charles asked who she was with. Lucas heard that it was some kind of community, invited by the guardian of the region, the Northern Academic Community. The girls were talking about something and smiling. Charles was surprised that she was even laughing. Of course, spending time with girls her age is more interesting than living alone in an unfamiliar imperial palace. The girls discussed the first uncensored edition. In the bedroom of the Duke of the North, it is never cold. The order of the ceremony has already been approved. They would be upset if, after coming all the way here, they couldn't take part in the Empire Founding Festival. There was no point even in answering. Revealing Emily's identity in this situation is dangerous. There is no telling what might happen. While everyone is in their place, everyone made an effort. A carriage drove up to the palace. An elegant, handsome man emerged from her. The morning of the founding of the empire arrived, and the master of ceremonies checked and accepted the invitation. And also added, "Welcome, Mr. Tom Rowican, head of the trade union." He looked around the room carefully. The imperial reception in honor of the founding day brings together influential people regardless of their origin and citizenship. As representatives of Furza's largest corporation, Tom Holdings, he has sent an invitation every year, but until now he has sent a representative in his place, citing his busy schedule. Now he no longer needs to hide from Charles Furs. As expected, the room was filled with influential figures. And his business partner Andrew is busy charming noble ladies again. This man is the hereditary sultan of the eastern desert state of Phaya. Ryan, the head of the Imperial Guard, and the man next to him, a knight, commander of the order, the Red Lion. Also present at the ball are kings of neighboring states, high-ranking aristocrats, famous scientists. Although he has already seen the guest list, now he is sure that the hall is filled exclusively with opponents of the war, both inside and outside Furza. He looked away. And of course, the main guest must appear in person. Charles Furza, Emperor Furza. He took out his sword and raised it up. Using the rune, the sword glowed with a bright blue light, which really caught people's attention. Everyone started applauding. It was just incredible. Every time they are amazed by his dazzling radiance. This is a legendary sword bliss, endowed with divine blessing. The water was floating in the air, and when it was reflected through the light of the chandelier, it looked like a precious stone. Tom heard that he was especially strong in water magic, but he didn't expect his abilities to be at this level. It seems that this technique also demonstrates the Empire's power. This year, there are especially many familiar faces. In honor of the day when the Empire made a great oath, in gratitude to them who had come this long way, he did not remember the words after that, so he decided to start the ball. Lucas was extremely outraged that he had given an official speech like that. It was really impressive. Furza is really big, said a turn to his servant. He asked if the man called Max was in the room. The servant looked around carefully, but did not sense anyone with such an aura here. He told him that they must find this man and bring him to Phaya. Charles and Seta's gazes met. They bowed and greeted the emperor. He asked how the guest from afar was doing, but he regrets that he was unable to greet him in person due to the hardships of travel. He smiled, remembering how different he had been the first time they met. Charles said he had grown noticeably since last year. He will leave the search for Max to his service. As the heir of the Sultan of Phaya, he officially requests Furza's support. He must focus on his goal. Meanwhile, in the conference room, at the annual seminar of the Northern Club, presentation of new books by the Northern Dukes and publication of sales ratings, exhibition of sculptures, paintings, and other secondary works of art, a report on the state of affairs in the field of translation and theatrical productions. Happy and fulfilling moments continue. With the main performances now over, they now move on to the next item, the short story competition for newcomers. One of the most important annual competitions of the Northern Club, newcomers who join the club this year are required to participate. The theme is always the same, the Northern Duke. Authors write short stories on a free topic, and the winner is chosen by voting among club members. The best story gets a chance for official publication in a publishing house that is a partner of the Northern Club. This year, they will add a special rule: joint writing between senior and junior members of the club. One graduate of Schumann Academy and one current student will form a pair. Write a story during the festival. This year, the winner will receive a place in the Northern Club's Hall of Fame. The drawing of lots began. Amber took out the first piece of paper. First pair, eldest, Livia, junior, Lily. Second pair, eldest, Mary, junior, Athena. Emily hasn't written a story since graduation, but working together with a nice younger student causes a positive storm of emotions. The third pair, the eldest, Emily, the youngest, Ryan. The door opens and he comes in, apologizing for being late, as he was delayed by the opening ceremony of the festival. It was an interesting couple. Emily was not thrilled. She even started shaking a little, and even wanted to burst into tears. Rai thought about co-writing with a mentor, and his mentor is Emily. She was on fire. They would have to win to live up to the reputation of the founder of the Northern Club, only first place, in which case Ryan would just have to not interfere with her. A maid came into the hall. She was looking for Max and also asked if there was a person with that name in the hall. Emily ran up and asked what was wrong. By order of the Emperor, they must accompany her to today's ball. She couldn't believe her ears. The true virtue of a servant is the ability to keep a calm expression on her face. Bertha has been serving in the Imperial Palace as a lady's maid for 10 years. The servants must not show any emotion, even if His Majesty suddenly orders them to receive an unknown guest on the day of the foundation of the state. Even if this person is completely inappropriate for the status of guests at the ball in honor of the founding of the state. The true skill of a servant is to hide any curiosity and personal judgments. There is little time to prepare, they need to hurry. There were many servants gathered in the room, all of them busy with their work. It's sometimes impossible to hide your emotions. Emily looked absolutely stunning. But the thoughts in Emily's head were only about who she was and where she was. The servants began to applaud, showering her with compliments from head to toe. She was beautiful, a real heavenly beauty. One of the maids was ashamed that she had not noticed her and her true charm earlier. His Majesty did indeed order her to be brought to the ball. It will begin very soon. She does not understand what he has planned, but now it is impossible for anyone to find out who she really is. The maid asked her not to worry, as long as she just snapped her fingers. His Majesty had provided everything especially for this evening. The girl opened the box. Emily was surprised by such a smart move. As the ball began, the guests received an unexpected announcement. In keeping with the spirit of the holiday, which is meant to unite everyone, regardless of origin and citizenship. This year, the ball in honor of the founding of the state will be held in the form of a masquerade. Everyone was given identical white masks, and it seemed that even the invited guests were hearing about this for the first time. If masks were brought with them, they would differ in style and decoration, and the meaning of the masquerade as a way to hide identity could disappear, which is why he chose this option. He calculates even the smallest details of entertainment. It was a hastily made decision. The order was received several hours before the start of the ball. Everyone started putting on masks. Tom could not believe his eyes. In the distance, he saw a familiar silhouette approaching. She entered the hall like the embodiment of a half-forgotten dream, so that even the air around froze, permeated with the aroma of jasmine and mystery. Her dress, woven from 1,000 blue shimmering sequins, it flowed along her slender figure. Her face was like a marble statue and lived under the brush of a brilliant master. Even the most caustic Soviet lionesses fell silent, watching her go. There was no one more beautiful at the ball. Her fiery red hair flowed in waves, her scarlet lips frozen in a slight smile, and her yellow almond-shaped eyes. Her gaze slid slowly across the hall, as if touching everyone but allowing only one to hold it. Andrew immediately recognized Emily, because how could you not recognize a girl with such a figure and such hair? She was the beloved of that very partner. The servant turned to his sultan. "It is she," he said. Seda was speechless. He examined her carefully. This is a truly holy act. The ball, a must-have in any romantic novel, from debutantes to court balls, is a classic of classics, because it is that moment when hands touch, feet accidentally step on each other. Their eyes meet, and it becomes that very spark that makes you realize love. She was worried that she wouldn't have enough ideas for the competition, but she would make the most of the situation. Suddenly, someone extended their hand to her and asked her to do them the honor of dancing the first dance. The head of the Northern Trade Guild, he was surprised that she recognized him. But how could she not recognize him? She smiled sincerely and gave him her hand, and was also very glad to meet him. It feels like there is fire in the place where you touch, a piercing sensation somewhere in your chest. The air seems heavy and hot, but a chill runs down your spine. Emily warned him that she had never learned to dance and would most likely step on feet. Tom said that he would lead, also adding that she could step as much as she wanted. Charles ruined the moment for them. He came up and said it was too rude to take your partner right out of their hands. He leaned over and added with a little pressure, it was he who invited her. Tom wondered if he could call him Your Majesty, if he could even show that they knew each other. But it was he, Charles Furza, who chose the music first. If he didn't like it, he should have met his lady at the entrance himself. Charles didn't like this tone because his interlocutor couldn't tell the emperor how to behave with his partner. Tom pointed out to him that the masks weren't worn to communicate as equals, and they headed to the training room. Since the dance didn't take place, Emily decided to go out onto the balcony. The two of them, ever since their first meeting in Floria, had a tense atmosphere, and she hoped that they would become best friends. Male friendship always begins with a fight. She is upset that she was unable to dance with the Duke, but for the sake of their strong friendship, she is ready to give in. Moreover, it was incredibly funny. The dark-haired Northern Duke, not real, and the golden-haired Emperor, real. She thought that maybe it was worth using this as material for a book. It would be brilliant to make the Emperor a woman, so there would be a tyrannical Empress, a Northern Duke, caring and kind, and then the Empress locks him in a dungeon, a classic plot, but with unexpected twists. Someone behind him said that he would definitely win the competition, because who can he trust if not himself? She looked at him with a very sad and disappointed look. Ryan felt bad because every time he found her and saw her, she had such a look. Since they are now partners, he would like to become friends with their future daughter-in-law. To which she asked who he called daughter-in-law, he added that they were not officially divorced yet, so formally, daughter-in-law. Living in a palace is hard. She heard that she was not allowed to leave the palace until the celebration was over. Ryan took off his mask and said, "His Majesty gave such an order, but is it possible to live blindly following other people's words? The founding of an empire is a grand event, the biggest and most luxurious holiday not only in the Furza Empire, but in the entire continent of Asia. She really needs to visit the main square." He invited her to go there together in search of inspiration. After all, this is an official study on behalf of the Imperial Academy. She smiled at him with great desire. Her smile was sincere and warm, like a ray of sunshine. And then they shook hands. The ball was in full swing. The women whispered. The two men who had just passed were in fact the Emperor himself and Tom Rukin. They were going to fight in the arena of the Imperial Palace. Tom and Charles looked at each other carefully, as if studying each other. He knew the rules. If you drop your sword or touch your knee to the ground, you lose. There are a lot of spectators today, so runes are forbidden. He put one hand behind his back. He said as a slight concession, he would fight with one hand. Tom stood in the semi-darkness, his face illuminated by the dim light that came through the windows. At that moment, his eyes flashed like two bright lights, full of mad brilliance. They sparkled, reflecting the storm of emotions raging inside him. This look spoke of many things, of struggle, of hope, and of madness, of the fact that he was ready to do everything to achieve his goal. Every look and word he spoke radiated arrogance, causing irritation. He would regret it. Richard saw Tom. He couldn't find him during the reception. He disappeared too abruptly. Enemy of Servan, sworn enemy of Sebastian. Richard was truly rooting for him. He had to win. Isaac stood behind him, interested in looking at that same Tom Rukin who was trying to seduce his daughter. It was very rude to mention such things at a masquerade, and besides, it was probably his daughter who was trying to seduce him. Isaac was irritated by these words. He added that he was even ashamed to watch him fight. He was rooting for His Majesty. After all, he had not trained him to lose to such a worthless person. Another confrontation between fathers had begun. Their blades connected. Whoever wins this duel will get the first dance with Emily. Emily giggled, then added, "That was really nerve-wracking." The maid entered the room and turned pale when she saw the dress. The common people's dress is so light, she asked if it suited her. Ryan showed the class with his hand. It's good that the sizes turned out to be accurate by eye. Apparently, he had prepared an outfit for her in advance. They headed to their destination. During the celebration of the Foundation Day, even outside the palace, there are lavish celebrations synchronized with balls. There is even a saying that the real Foundation Day begins with the onset of night. The townspeople gather in the square, dance to melodies, and sing. By midnight, people are crowded in anticipation of the fireworks. She thought that everything was as it should be. They ran down some alley, Ryan surveying the area. He pointed to the roof of the house and suggested going higher. Using the rune, he instantly appeared there. He also helped Emily get up onto the roof. Ryan said he was looking for ideas for a book. The square was in the other direction, but he was leading her somewhere else. They jumped over houses, moving further and further away from the square. It all looked like some kind of slum. And what kind of romance can there be in such a place? He gestured that they should stop. They've been waiting for a long time. Their target is over there. Emily looked closely. She asked who those people were downstairs. After all, they don't look like priests, because the priests of the cult of creation wear white clothes. These are followers of a sect, the Church of Happiness. Supposedly they are behind the rumors of their connection with the Emperor. Their funding is so strange that he decided to investigate. The results were very interesting. They find poor people or people in difficult situations, offer them free help, and then force them to hand over all their property to the sect, after which their families are moved to an estate owned by the sect and turned into lifelong workers, a classic sect. Emily had a rather surprised look on her face. She was a little angry because Ryan had brought her in to arrest these crooks, but not to find material for their story. She was also wondering why they have the royal guard. She doesn't think she will help the investigation much. They went downstairs. Actually, it's his plan. Max, said the Sultan, putting his hand on her shoulder. He asked how long he could wander around anywhere. She didn't understand who it was and what he wanted from her. When he entered Furza's auction, she dragged him out of there without permission. She covered her mouth with her hand. This is the same boy Ryan thought the prince was doing here. She was surprised at how quickly he grew up. He took a deep breath, collecting his thoughts. He came to her with a request, but Ryan apologized and said that they were busy. Seth asked Emily to be his wife. There was an instant frozen expression on their faces. Their eyes widened and their eyebrows raised, and there was a brief pause in breathing. A sudden, deafening, startling fireworks display erupted in the sky, bright, blinding flashes tearing through the darkness, reflecting in the windows of houses. Emily's mouth dropped open in surprise. She even had a speech impediment, and then a question followed. Emily didn't understand what was going on. He decided to introduce himself formally. His name is Seda Nasr bin Zayed al-Faya. He is the legitimate heir to the great state of the Sultan of the Kingdom of Faya. He originally came to this national holiday to discuss cooperation with Furza, but one of the reasons was also that he was looking for her. He wants to propose to become his wife, the wife of the Sultan. Emily was very surprised by such a proposal. It seemed like complete nonsense to her. If she remembers correctly, Faya is that desert country on the eastern edge of the Asha continent. Faya and Furza have always maintained good relations. But why would the heir to the throne of such a state? Apparently he fell in love with the savior of his life, to which Seta replied that this was not the reason at all. He understands that in Furz it is impolite to propose to someone he is not so close to, but due to the measures, he has no choice. Now that she had said it, he remembered that His Majesty had said something similar. Emily was interested in what it was, Mir. In Faya there is a power called Mir. Similar to how rune magic is used in Furzi, it is a magic that controls time. It is incredibly powerful, but at the same time extremely complex and dangerous. It is so difficult to control that an unprepared body simply cannot withstand it. In Fae, only the Sultan is able to wield this magic freely, so the power is passed down through generations to maintain continuity. But over the centuries, the accumulated measure has become so powerful that now the human body can no longer accommodate it. Among the Sultan's heirs, only he was able to accept all this power, but it is unstable and can get out of control at any moment. They tried many methods, but nothing helped. However, when he touched her, a miracle happened. The mirror began to stabilize. If the measure gets out of control, the consequences will be catastrophic. So he asks her to go with her to Faya once again. If he becomes Sultan, she will automatically become Empress. You can't just offer her such a position, but he asked not to worry about it. The wife of a Sultan is not the same as an Empress. It's a title for women with special powers that secretly help govern the country, and it's not just one specific woman, and feelings aren't required. She can live in luxury and surround herself with any men she likes. It all sounded very tempting, but she couldn't just leave for another country, so Seth began to offer her gold, ancient knowledge. He would give her everything she wanted. What bothered her most was that he was just a child. He took his pendant to show her. The magic began to work. She only saw a temporarily rejuvenated version, thanks to the measures, but next year he will officially become an adult. He seemed like a baby to her, but he still asked her to take his proposal very seriously because Faya's fate depended on it. She lifted him up, and then she hugged him, saying that he was much cuter like this. Emily offered him to stay here in this body, and she would raise him well. He did not like it at all, because no one dares to treat the hereditary sultan like a kitten. Ryan turned around. The cart with people had already started its journey. He grabbed Emily's hand and asked her to hurry, because they needed to get into this carriage, since it was heading to the estate of the Church of Happiness. If they miss it, there's no telling when the next opportunity will come. The cart was a few meters away from them. They were almost late. They looked very tired. It was difficult to say a few words because of the shortness of breath. There were also other people in it who looked at them strangely and suspiciously. Ryan took the initiative into his own hands. He told them not to be afraid because they were also followers of the Church of Happiness. Hearing that they were being taken to such a good place, they could not resist and simply jumped into the carriage. One granny said what decent young people they were. Emily asked what was on Ryan's mind. The headquarters of the Church of Happiness is a very closed place. They tried to get in there, but they only accept families. Apparently, they are so afraid of being exposed that they allow strangers to come near them. Therefore, they pretend to be spouses with them and get inside. Emily tried to tell him that he was talking nonsense, but he covered her mouth with his hand so that she wouldn't talk too much. She wondered why because he had security, Ryan was the commander of the guard. How could he pretend to be the husband of one of his subordinates? Emily thought that this man was the only one showing common sense here. In addition, she has enough fighting skills to protect herself if something goes wrong. And most importantly, she deeply cares about the safety of His Majesty, caring about the well-being of the Emperor. It is the duty of every subject of the Empire. It is a matter of the Emperor's safety and the future of their country, and she has already agreed to help. If he says so, then she really has no other choice. The woman in the cart began to calm her son. He was hungry, but she encouraged him by saying that they would soon get to a good place. Emily understood his plan roughly, But why should Seth go with them? They both looked at him. Ryan asked why she took him with her, but Emily only now found out that in fact, Paradise had simply grabbed him and dragged him into the carriage. She suggested saying that he was her son, but they needed to say something believable. When the carriage in which Emily and her companions were riding crossed the border of Zikrit, a blow the sword broke in half. It flew several meters to the side and hit the floor with a loud sound. When this happened, Charles and Tom stopped. A battle was ending in the Imperial Palace. Mesrin and Ruikin, the battle of the fathers. Isaac was pleased, as expected. His Majesty dealt with this pathetic upstart with one hand. Isaac Mesrin won 2 victories and 2 defeats, 0 draws. Charles put his sword to Tom's throat. Ruikin lost. It was dangerous. Even with one hand, he began to lose for a moment. Charles was impressed that he had reached such a level. There was no need to give it his all. It was possible to simply assess his strength and end in a draw. It was already late. It was time to return to the hall. Lucas ran in and addressed the Emperor. Ryan applied for leave and disappeared in the middle of a national holiday. Charles thought he was up to something again. Lucas asked to see it in person and handed him the document. He took it and began to study it carefully. Leave request, Imperial Guard, Commander-in-Chief Ryan. Leave duration unknown, location possibly Mount Kitu, reason for leave, attendance at a scientific conference. This document confirms that he is requesting leave for the stated reason. And Emily will accompany him. As Lucas said, she disappeared right after she changed into the dress. They headed to Mount Kitu, current location, Zikrit. Mount Kidu. He became very curious about what they were doing there. Mine number 31 in the Rurt Mountains. The workers worked in the mines. Even if you look at it every day, it's still amazing. A horse that can pull such a heavy cart alone. The best scan of the continent, a hybrid of aquatic horse. Shukrim is a rare breed of astronomical value. He was the one who created that trouble then, so if he himself caused the accident, let him deal with it himself. That was Isaac Mejkrino's order. If you send him to that mine, he will go with the work of dozens of adults. He now works at the Rurt mine. It's just not fair. He's a water horse hybrid, just one mistake, and he was made to suffer like this. Then a phoenix appeared. Shukrim was surprised by its appearance. The phoenix became interested in what it was doing here. Shukrim shared the news with him. He was sent here to pay off a loan. Every day he receives 100 rubles a day. Phoenix had asked him earlier not to go far from Emily, but he couldn't help it. Everything was too confusing to explain. Their mistress was in danger. Perhaps the great chain of fate accelerates the flow of the connection. He needs to get back to her urgently. Shukrima must never forget who she really is. He didn't want to cause her any more trouble, but it looked like he would have to. His shackles were in little pieces. The man who was working in the mine turned around after hearing a strange sound. He rushed past the workers at lightning speed, raising dust, causing everyone to cover their faces. They didn't understand what it was. Shukrim rushed at great speed. He had a premonition that the mistress was now suffering. He didn't want anything to happen to her. The girl at the church greeted them and asked about their relationship. They introduced themselves as brothers and sister. Headquarters, Church of Happiness, Kitusan. She asked again, brother and sister. Ryan introduced them all by different names. He was the older brother Louis, Emily was Shay, and Seth was Sia. One of the servants leaned towards the girl and said that they were not at all similar and it would be better to clarify. They stood there as if nothing had happened, playing their currently important role. Emily decided to tell. In fact, that is the secret about their birth. The first father saw the first mother and fell in love at first sight, so the older brother Louis appeared, but the first father died, valiantly fighting in the war. It was hard for the mother to raise a child alone, so she got married a second time, but then she died in a carriage accident, and the second father married the second mother, so she appeared, and the younger brother Say, his story is even more complicated. The girl asked us to wait here while the documents were being prepared, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Emily did a great job. As I expected from the chairman of the Northern Union, she also felt that they agreed a little too easily. The distinctive feature of sex is that they evaluate success by the number of recruited followers, and their 3 young people, for them, are not bad prey. Although, to be more precise, not 3. 2 adults and 1 child. To Seta, this just sounded ridiculous. Ryan wants him to pretend to be their little brother and help with the investigation. He put on a sweet face and begged him to stay with them for just a few days. It wouldn't last long. He had already requested support from Furza. He remembered how he had previously infiltrated the ranks of slaves, about the time when he was almost sold at auction. Seta is looking for a criminal who escaped from Faith to Furza. The plan was to infiltrate the slave ranks and track him down through connections among the Furza nobility. He was sure that the criminal would try to establish contact with corrupt aristocrats. But unfortunately, this plan failed, and as the heir of Sultan Fei, he formally requested assistance from Emperor Furza at the gala dinner to celebrate the Foundation Day. The emperor agreed to help, so he would also do them a small favor. Ryan wonders if it's true that the Sultan's heirs are sent undercover to hunt down criminals, and even as illegal slaves. It was too dangerous. Emily asked why he was looking for it alone. Ryan also suggested that he might be his relative, one of the Sultan's heirs. He pointed his finger at Emily menacingly and said that his proposal of marriage still stood, so she shouldn't forget about it, as if he was evading the answer. Seta asked her to think carefully, because until now, no one had managed to stabilize the Mer, and she would become the hero of Fea and her savior. But she didn't really want such fame. There is no choice. Then Emily screamed that she was married. A moment of silence, he tried to contain his emotions. He also looked from Ryan to Emily, covering his mouth with his hands in surprise. Seta first thought that they were together, but the guys jumped up and said that it was some kind of misunderstanding. He also began to think about the fact that she was married, and he could not marry a woman who had a family. Well, he also asked if he would investigate why her presence was stabilizing the measures. Would she be able to help? She nodded. Now we need to figure this out. He asked what their next plan was. But then a girl came in and addressed them, dear converts. She thanked him for waiting and asked him to follow her. The estate is in the purest and most sacred place. On top of Kitusen, they need to continue walking up this road. Emily went to the carriage because it was very cold in the mountains, and she could warm up in it. Then a hand was placed on her shoulder, as if stopping her. The girl turned to her. Sister, this was transport for honored guests. For the followers, she pointed down with her hand. They would have to walk along this road. They all looked at the structure in slight horror. Sometimes people fall down, so she offered to take the rope and handed it to them. Emily felt like there was something wrong with this plan. There was no end in sight, and they would truly rise to the very top. Emily asked Ryan if he had thought of a backup plan, but unfortunately, as it turned out, he did not foresee this. Emily screamed that he was an idiot. They could barely stand on their feet. Ryan even picked up Seth and sat him on his back. They were finally approaching the finish line. There were so many plants there that in such weather, it seemed they couldn't even grow. Suddenly, a man came up and asked about the newly arrived followers. Emily nodded, and also added that when they got up here they should be met, and also asked where they could get the same fur cape. They were thrown into some room, told that these were their new living quarters. From today onwards, they were not allowed to go beyond the fence. If they needed to leave the territory, they would need to get permission. If they failed to meet the established harvest quota, their rations and essential items will be cut. They were ordered to clean their rooms by evening. She decided to take advantage of the moment and try to use her fire wound. Ryan stopped her because they might notice, and then problems will begin. Among these priests, there are many experienced rune mages, and her runes are especially strong, so you need to be careful. He took out matches and lit the stove. Emily stood warming her hands, her face pink from the cold. Sita sat wrapped up on the floor. She asked Ryan what exactly he was planning to do here. They had already infiltrated the estate. Why not just arrest them all right now? It was pointless to do this now. All the victims themselves gave up their property and came here voluntarily. Besides, they are completely confident that the Church of Happiness is a good place. Since they entered this sect of their own free will, the very fact of the existence of the estate is not enough to eliminate them. But according to rumors, on the last day of the founding festival, a certain secret ritual will take place near the estate. They say they are going to put a curse on the Emperor. Emilia asked again, a curse on His Majesty. Is the Church of Happiness really connected with the remains of Servan? But the Emperor has many enemies, not only Servan. From a young age, having taken the throne, he established a balance of power, eliminating the titles of the highest nobility in the course of the purge of the nobility. In addition, previously hereditary positions at court are now distributed only on the basis of merit. Because of this, the current nobility has almost no means of maintaining power, and of course, many are unhappy with this. And it seems that the Church of Happiness has taken advantage of this. In other words, they exploit the common people, taking their property and labor, and also recruit nobles who are dissatisfied with the Emperor. Therefore, they must break into the ritual site and destroy the sect at once. Now everything was clear to Emily, but what kind of curse it was unclear. Did curse magic exist? And not just lunar magic. Although, most likely, it was just a scam. Symbol: Church of Happiness, grinning face, looks like a lizard. This image, Asha the dragon, they say they revere him. There were too many questions on Emily's face. Meanwhile, after the duel between Prince Charles and Sebastian, Richard asked if Tom was okay. He knew he had his reasons, but to attend the royal receptions and then also to fight Charles first, In any case, his identity was already known to him. He went to the reception to see someone. Richard immediately thought of the girl. He decided to voice his question and clarify whether he was talking about that red-haired lady. She is also connected to the royal family, Richard apologized. He shouldn't have meddled in something that wasn't his business. And also asked what his next step was. Tom showed him the handkerchief. He was heading to the headquarters, the Church of Happiness. They say their estate is in the Kitu Mountains on the last day of the founding festival. A secret ritual called the Original Contract will take place nearby. They say they are going to curse Prince Charles with the power of the Asha dragon. The question followed whether he really believed in this absurdity. They know that the Church of Happiness is just a bunch of charlatans, and Tom was convinced of this personally. But what is important is to know which nobles joined them against Charles Furza. The order, Xenia, which previously supported Servan, has already been destroyed. To overthrow Charles and consolidate power for himself, he needed new allies. He squeezed the handkerchief in his hand in anger. In any case, he doesn't need any curses to stop his heart in 10 minutes. The girl greeted Tom, smiling joyfully and sweetly. He had come a long way. She said, "Welcome, Mr. Thomas Rukin." He raised his head up, looking at the falling snowflakes. A beautiful temple stood behind her. To build such a majestic building in the Kitu Mountains was no easy task, but for them it was a piece of cake. She offered to take him to the estate and asked him to get into the carriage. As their top donor for the quarter, he will receive the special privilege of seeing the ritual site in advance. Church of Happiness, a sect that worships the so-called ancestor, Asha Dragon. For 1,000 years of the existence of this continent, there has not been a single confirmed case of the appearance of dragons. And yet, their idea is that the real ruler of these lands is Asha Dragon, and the emperor is a usurper. All this became a convenient pretext for dissatisfied nobles. The man met them and showed them the estate where their like-minded people work. Here live simple followers, serving in the name of faith. For a man, it seemed a picturesque view. However, people almost naked, frozen, and on the verge of illness stood in the cold, periodically rubbing their hands to warm up a little. He invited him to look around, and then they would take him to the place of the ritual. I hope it's much worse than Tom thought. Previously, he thought that if this organization was harming Furzy, it would be better to just leave them alone. But how could it be called a benefit to allow this to continue? If he kills Charles, what awaits him next is a question that remains a mystery. Until now, he had only thought about how to revive Servan and take the throne. But is the pursuit of power for the sake of revenge the right path? Will he really be able to become a ruler? He walked so thoughtfully that he didn't notice how he stepped on a plant that the girl was planting. Her hands were red from the frost. He asked for forgiveness. It was his mistake. She asked him to be more attentive. A simple, sorry, is not enough. They looked at each other. Neither he nor she had expected to meet here, in this place, at this hour. They froze as if time had compressed into an instant, and only silence hung between them, thick and ringing. The same thing was written on their faces, surprise mixed with something else, maybe with joy, or maybe with slight anxiety. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words got stuck somewhere in his throat. She was silent too. Only the corners of her lips twitched, an uncertain attempt at a smile, a question that remained unanswered for now. Everyone around was busy with their own affairs. But here, in this small, as if islands of an unexpected meeting, time seemed to have stopped. And then came the question, "What are you doing here?" She asked him the same question. Each of them needs to hide their identity. They shook hands to remove any suspicion that they knew each other. It looks like they both have circumstances that are best left unsaid. The girl is hard to keep track of. If this continues, her personality may soon be revealed. In fact, if we are talking about her, then sooner or later he would like to someday. If she has time, Tom managed to finish telling me. Ryan walked over and took her hand, pulling her towards him. She asked what happened. I didn't expect to see him here. This man, how long is he going to play with people? Isn't his hobby too bad? He gave his real name, Sebastian Weiner de Servan, Prince of Servan. Emily asked what it meant. Ryan had long known that he was posing as Tom Rukin. He didn't catch him because he knew that he would come to him himself. He just waited. It was a sign of respect for his brother's desire to meet him again. But if it is connected with sex and happiness, then that is a different story. He was always prepared for the fact that his personality might be revealed, but even knowing his plan, it is impossible to prepare for it. He doesn't care that someone is watching his actions. It doesn't matter if Ryan knows Furs? Emily asked if it was true. All this time he was deceiving her. He was kind to her. It was also part of some plan. There were a lot of questions. What did he answer? No. Someday, even later, he would like to have at least one opportunity to explain everything to her. Ryan asked what he was up to, since everyone knew Emily Majorino was his enemy. He didn't understand what he was talking about, Ryan asked, pretending not to know. He wants to avenge Servan's defeat, the Red Lion of the battlefield, Isaac Majorino, the one who stopped the victorious advance of Servan's army. He exhaled heavily. He doesn't care at all. He just doesn't hate. Lucas asked again what he meant. Charles sat on the sofa and twirled the crown on his finger. He asked him to tell him everything he knew about Aries Recanois. Lucas looked at him in surprise. His Majesty is acting strangely. After Paradise took Emily Majorino, he lost all interest. He even took a casual attitude towards the events to mark the founding day, especially those strange questions about that man. Ares Recanois was the younger sister of the late Empress Athena Recanois de Ferza. They were very close, but she was taken away 20 years ago. She was held hostage in Servan, where she gave birth to Sebastian Weiner, Prince of Servan, and a bastard. Sebastian is a stubborn boy. He recently met him in Floria. Come to think of it, he said something strange. He hates only because his mother, who believed in her homeland until the very end, endured all the humiliations, and eventually died at the hands of people like them. Ryan stood in front of Emily and covered her with his hand. The rest could have died, he didn't care, but he would never forgive them for what they did to his mother. When we met, he said exactly that. Lucas asked why it was his fault. Lady Ari's head was cut off by Servan's troops. The man approached him and said that it was time for them to go. Ryan tried to stop him. He looked at Emily again. He nodded his head in farewell and left. Charlie asked if this information was accurate. Lucas wondered if he seriously believed this man's words, since he himself knew how it all ended for the late Empress. The truth, none of them saw with their own eyes, but Sebastian was there. If the words on both sides differ, then it needs to be checked. Charles asked to raise all the records about the war with Servan that are in Furtz, including confiscated documents from Servan and materials from neighboring countries, and they need to compare every number and date, identify all the discrepancies. He seems to be sure that there are errors in Furza's archives. Lucas accepted his decree. He will immediately submit a request to create a commission. Charles pointed his finger at him and told him that he had to do it himself. The horror in Lucas's eyes was clear. He alone would have to check the archives for 10 years. It was simply impossible. There are thousands of pages, and if you count the external records, then even more. But His Majesty said, figure it out yourself. Lucas even fell to his knees asking for help. She stroked his head and said that her task was to protect His Majesty. Life is sometimes unpredictable. He didn't think he would dare to dig into the archives of the war with Servan. But perhaps now he will have a chance to find information about the Red Witch. In the year 612 of the imperial calendar, the Persian Empire had barely enjoyed the birth of its crown prince when it received a declaration of war from the Servan Empire. The military power of Servan, which was actively expanding its territories, significantly exceeded the forces of Persia. The emperor and empress were faced with a difficult choice. At that moment, it was very difficult for the empress. She said goodbye to her, the only sister of the empress, daughter of the ducal house of Recanois, a true treasure and flower of Persia. Lady Aries Recanois decided to intervene. She voluntarily offered herself as Servan's hostage. Thus began the 612th year of the imperial calendar, thanks to which Persis was able to achieve a 5-year truce with Servan. However, in the year 612, when the term expired, Servan began an invasion. The empress, having lost the emperor in battle, herself stood at the head of the army and resisted Servan to the last. The bravery of the empress and the exploits of the Order of the Red Lion prolonged the war, which seemed an easy victory to Servan and put them in a difficult situation. The princess returned to her homeland, but already a cold corpse. Deeply shocked by this, Empress Athena Recanois de Percy died 2 years later after a serious illness. Charles took the sword. 2 years later, in the year 627 by the imperial calendar, Charles Furza declared the end of the war and ascended the throne. That was all Ryan knew about Sebastian's birth mother. The ground was frozen. He still thought that Sebastian was acting out of loyalty to the Servan Empire, but now he sees that he rather blames the imperial family for failing to protect Princess Aries. He said so. She died at your hands. Emily asked if the Persian army was involved in his mother's death, but it was simply impossible. Ryan was very little then, so he vaguely remembers how it really was. But he knows one thing. His mother loved Princess Aries more than her own children. After she saw the princess's body, her torment did not stop until her death. There were too many strange things in this story. For example, Emily was only now hearing about such an important figure as Princess Aries for the first time. Most likely, it is not only about the information about her. Emily wondered if Ryan had ever read any books or documents about the Servan War, which was something they were supposed to teach at the academy. The Servan War is a taboo subject for his brother. All information and records are under strict control of the imperial court, and those involved are ordered to remain silent. Even the young ministers most likely know nothing. It's very strange, because His Majesty saved the entire continent at such a young age. This is a reason for pride, but Ryan does not read his brother's mind. And he hides more than one such thing. While chatting, he injured his hand, to which Emily said that he was terrible at working in the fields. He reassured Emily that Sebastian was being watched by imperial guards, so he would be caught quickly, and it was time for them to return. But the job was not finished. The land needs to be leveled. They need to meet the harvest quota, but she has become too engrossed in her role. You have to understand that they are not here to farm. She was clutching a fragile sprout in her palms. Its stem was already drooping. Her chest was constricted with grief, and tears were frozen in her eyes, not spilled, but burning. She was thinking about Tom and did not understand whether she could trust him, forgive him and grow something new, or unclench her fingers and let him go forever. This plant smell seems very familiar to her. Ryan dragged Emily into the house. Seth was already tired of waiting. He was sitting and writing something. Emily asked if he was tired of sitting at home all day, but he said that he would never leave here. Ryan was warming himself by the stove, and Emily was interested in what Seth was writing. It turned out that he was recording his observations about the stabilization of the myrrh. When she was near him, the flow of the myrrh really calmed down. It is said that myrrh, it is a power originating from an ancient divine beast that controls time, and it is originally not subject to the human body. The only reason their Fey line can use it is because they have a slight trace of the beast's blood running through them. He showed her the drawing without asking if she had his heritage in her family. There was a dragon drawn there, Emily answered. Most likely not. Her father is an ordinary person. But then Seth asked about her mother. As sad as it may sound, her mother is already in this world. She passed away almost immediately after she was born. Isaac Megerino resigned as commander-in-chief because of his birth mother, Emily Megerino. It's very strange that Ryan never tried to find out who she was. Other than the fact that she died of childbed fever, nothing is known. They began asking questions about her origins, whether she could have been of the Fea family, and where exactly Sir Isaac first met her. Because of this pressure, Emily decided to take a walk. As soon as conversations start about her mother, she immediately becomes uncomfortable. She wondered if she should tell Seth about this, but she realized that she and her father had promised not to talk about her mother. What is more important now is that he is the master of the northern lands. Actually, Prince Servan. Emily still can't believe that Prince Servan is supposed to be a cruel villain, but the one she knew is nothing like that. The look on his face yesterday, she had never seen him look like that before. She was sad. She didn't understand. Everything he had shown her so far was just a game. If that's the case, Emily will never forgive him. A guy who calls himself Sebastian Weiner greeted one of the leaders of the Church of Welfare. It is an honor to meet him in person. He looked closely at Tom Rukin. He had a feeling that he had seen him somewhere. Although it is very difficult to forget a figure like Toma Ruikin, the reason why he gathered here the best followers of the Church of Welfare is that the time of the Great Descent is approaching, in honor of the coming, the rite of the primordial weakness. They are given the opportunity to watch the miracle from the most honorable places. This is a great honor, so we cannot forget to express gratitude to the bishop. The Church of Welfare has reached such heights only thanks to their loyalty. The guy started calling Tom, but he didn't respond. He apologized and said he was nervous. They raised their glasses and said a prayer. For the true owner of this land seized without permission, for the great Asha dragon. Imperial Great Library. Secret Archive. Materials for the second half of the year 626. The war with Servan ended in 627. They still have one more year to test. All records of the war with Servan that exist in Furts must be studied from beginning to end. The Emperor personally ordered an analysis of the information about the war with Servan. Lucas begged His Majesty to give him someone to help him. He couldn't do it alone. He would really die. It was impossible. After much persuasion, he managed to get only one assistant, the Emperor said, to take Robert from the financial department. For several days now, they have been sitting together in the secret archive. Robert no longer remembers the last time he left work. Lucas reassured him that there was very little time left. Checking materials for 10 years is sheer hell, and also comparing them with documents confiscated from the Servans. Besides, no one has sorted them for 10 years. It's complete chaos. Just sorting them out is already an impossible task, but nothing can be done. The Emperor prohibited access to military archives until the very last moment. He destroyed all the princely families of the empire. Without hesitation, he exterminated the leaders of the rebellion. His actions may have seemed cruel, but if you understand the circumstances, they were justified. However, his obsession with censoring the war with Servin was something that no one could understand. Lucas hoped that by studying the archives he would be able to solve this mystery, but on the contrary, even comparing with the records of the Servans and neighboring countries, everything matches perfectly. If the Empire had been hiding serious crimes, such as mass murder of civilians, slavery, or robbery, the records would also indicate that Servan was behind it. I wonder why it is forbidden to talk about the war in which they won the greatest victory. October 12th, 626, complete destruction of the Western detachment in Syria. Lucas held the sheet and looked at Robert in surprise. There was not a single entry there. There is no evidence in the Furza archives that in October 626, the Servans' ambush force was completely destroyed in Syria. There must have been at least 100 men in the detachment. It was impossible that in a place like Syria, where fierce fighting was taking place, an entire battle would have been missed. In Furz, not a single report was received that same day. Robert thought about it and decided that this definitely needed to be checked. Then, in the mountains of Syria, the Order of the Red Lion was stationed. They turned to Isaac, judging by the records. He was the one there at the time. Since Isaac was acting as the emperor, it was probably acceptable that they briefed him, despite the emperor's order to finish together, since the information was top secret, he remembered, the ambush squad in Syria. Then His Highness, the Crown Prince, set out on a campaign against Carrion, but information came that an attack was being prepared through the Syrian mountains, and their order, which was in the south, went to Syria to prepare for defense. Lucas asked why they didn't report the destruction of the ambush team. Isaac replied, because they didn't. They returned to camp from reconnaissance. It was all over there already. The bodies of the dead were scattered. Judging by the shape of the corpse, this does not look like their method at all. In this region, and the troops of Furza are only their order. Little Emily then approached them, and they decided to ask her if she had seen anything. It was a secret. Some brother came and defeated everyone. They asked how many there were, what they were wearing, what they looked like, and she thought about it. And then she gave it to me. He was just incredibly handsome. Isaac and Vivi's faces were in complete shock from what they heard. In the end, the only witness was Emily. She didn't remember anything useful, so it remained a mystery whether it was an internal struggle or someone intervening from the outside. In fact, that very same event happened during this same period. The Battle of the Carrion Plateau, the difference in dates is very small. Lucas and Robert listened to him attentively. Isaac asked what surprised them so much, but he just straightened the papers and said that everything was fine. It's just that His Majesty gets extremely irritated if someone mentions this battle. Among the courtiers, it is a taboo and a taboo. Here it is. The battle on the Carrion Plateau, when 16-year-old Crown Prince Charles Furza destroyed 500 Servan soldiers in just one night, preparing to march on Zigrid alone, without the help of allies. After this battle, the war turned sharply in their favor. Servan lost his fighting spirit, and the war effectively ended. Why does His Majesty find his own words so burdensome? Robert saw some important document. He emotionally called Lucas. Robert showed him the document, which contained the Servans' records of the battle on the Carrion's Plateau. According to their data, that day they lost 3 infantry regiments, 2 units of Rune Knights, and 1 Imperial Cavalry unit. In total, 4,878 people died on the Carrion Plateau in one day. It sounded like complete nonsense. Even if His Majesty is considered the ruler of 5 continents, 5,000 is what? Lucas interrupted him. If the readings differ, you just need to check. The realization that he was right never left his face. The Servano's records are accurate, and if compared with Furza's documents after the battle on Carrion, it turns out that the Servano's losses really amounted to 5,000 people. This means that either there is a mistake in Furza's documents, or they were falsified. The question that interested them all, why hide information about the great victory? Isaac seemed to understand something. He froze in place. Robert called them over. They should take a look at this. In his hand, he held documents about Aries Recanois, the Duchess. Meanwhile, the estate of the Order of Happiness in the Kitu Mountains. A girl and a man came up. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, brothers and sisters, and also asked how they were living in the estate. As usual, Emily was joyful and screaming, shouting with delight. Great. In the mornings, she has to break the ice on the fields, but she already has a secret on how to do it. Seth thought that she was too carried away by it. The girl was glad to hear that she was satisfied. She held his gaze, deep and penetrating, as if trying to unravel the mystery hidden in every glimmer of light on her, the air between them filling with a quiet tension, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Then she took a strand of hair and smiled. Alarm flashed in both Sita and Ryan's eyes. What was happening was frightening. The girl congratulated them. Louis, Shay, and Sei, they were chosen as outstanding followers, and now they will be able to work in closed workshops. Emily was jumping for joy. Because she is an outstanding follower, she will continue to try. Working people on the street began to congratulate them on the transfer. In fact, it was very bad for them. They have no information at all about the closed workshops. He thought the only place of work of the order was this estate. I wonder where they are taking them. Sect Happiness, they called it. An internal workshop. But Ryan didn't think they'd cut such a cave in the Kitu Mountains. Said his legs hurt a lot. He was tired of walking, but he had to endure it a little. They had already gone quite far. As far as they dug, the girl stopped them. She pointed to the left and said to Emily, "Shay, come this way, and the rest of you will go to the right." Ryan asked why the two of them were walking separately. Because they have truly been given a great honor. Ms. Shay was chosen as the victim. They looked at her with fear. Then they looked at each other. Emily whispered in Ryan's ear and asked what the situation was, what casualties. But he himself didn't know the answer to this question. It seemed they had gone too far into a dangerous place, he agreed. Finally, she began to think sensibly. "Apparently, it's time to wind up this operation," the girl said. "Really? That is, they refuse such a glorious role as calling the great dragon Asha into this world." Emily didn't think long. She turned to Ryan, brother. Then she added that she would become a victim. He suggested that she think about it, because he thought it was too dangerous. She must see it with her own eyes. There was no face on him. The operation is important, but safety comes first. If there is a threat, let him destroy everything to hell. She just threw it at him. And then she followed the girl. Sita hopes that she will be okay. It seems like he has some clues. Let's let him figure it out. Although he may seem like a simpleton, she has an amazing talent for getting out of difficult situations. If Ryan is thinking of just using her and throwing her away, don't count on it. He won't let it go. He knows how valuable she is. The man told them to pass. This is a workshop where only the best followers are allowed. He asked them to pull themselves together, because if they couldn't cope with the volume of production, they would go back to the field. A strong smell of sulfur, a bomb factory. They should just stir the contents of these barrels. The man shouted at the workers because they were working slowly. They don't even have anything to say, because how do they even manage everything here? These guys are clearly unusual cultists. Judging by the scale, this is not just illegal trade, but it is not as if they are preparing for war. From now on, this is not a covert operation, but an arrest. Seta said that he couldn't handle it alone. There were plenty of rune mages here. In fact, Ryan had already called several of his men. Now they should wait at the foot of Mount Kitu. But if he leaves, chaos will start here. So he will leave it to him, Prince Sedu. It was all too unexpected for him, as if he was trying to use the air of Feya, as if he was taken for this very purpose from the very beginning. Ryan said it was pure chance, but since the card was drawn, why not play it to the fullest? In addition, his second sister, Shay, was among the victims. Isaac and Lucas headed to the Emperor with the securities. Lucas asked if everything written in these documents was true. He didn't know the whole truth. The Emperor was very close to the late Empress, and the death of the Rekenwa sisters also shook him greatly. Whether true or false, this story will be cruel for the Emperor and the hiding Prince Servan. Isaac burst into the Emperor's room and shouted, "Your Majesty, urgent message!" But the office was empty. They froze as if struck by lightning. Their faces just a moment ago full of confidence, now reflected only silent shock. Their eyes widened, their eyebrows shot up. Silence hung in the hall, thick as the air before a storm. A whisper of bewilderment crept between them, but it quickly died down. Drowned out by the weight of the inexplicable, approaching the table, they saw a note. It said that Ryan was too unreliable, so he